I'll say it.
こんにちは。今日は漫画家やアニメについてポッドキャストをお話しします。
In this episode, we channel Ernest Socrates.
Socrates. Gesundheit.
You'll never understand my pain.
I'm Sorensen.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was like, what do you want for Christmas this year? Phil Sorensen.
What is your opinion on the matter, Joshua Cook?
Yeah. What is your opinion on this game, Joshua Cook?
It's like super like.
See, I can't do that voice. I'd just be like, yo man. It's like the dialects.
It sounds like
Yeah, it's like the dialects from
Human.
Destroy. Oh.
Can't turn corners. Oh.
Do I sound okay?
You sound great.
Okay.
You actually
Do I
you all
sound good too?
That thing is right in your face. Do you want to lower it?
Son of a monkey biscuit.
Destroy.
Destroy with ear rape. Target confirmed.
No. Oh my gosh, dude, I remember. Do you know it's a great?
I'm laughing because I'm gonna have to. I don't want to edit that.
Oh,
But
you're gonna have to hear it.
What happened?
Wait,
we're recording right now?
No, we didn't.
Yes, we're absolutely
Let's
recording
go.
right now.
We didn't start yet though. Real quick before we start,
Yes.
dude, that's still one of my favorite Game Grumps is when they're playing like Sonic the Hedgehog, and it's like Omega's meeting Amy for the first time, and he's like,
Oh yeah.
1,000 ways to die, choose one. and she's like, you're not a bad robot, right? And he's like, you are incorrect. He's like, aiming, no, pulling trigger. Super gonna do it. Just
Oh gosh.
aiming,
That's
no,
hilarious.
Oh gosh.
pulling trigger.
I laughed way too hard. I think I was laughing because there's a song by the Amity Affliction. I can't remember what it's called.
My favorite band.
But there's an intro in the beginning where it's basically a digital female voice, and she's like, now loading Amity Affliction, sick bass pedals, and then like the bass comes in, and she's like, guitar, and it's like, add some reverb, and then it's like, then scream, and then like, yeah. So when you're like,
Oh.
it's just like, oh gosh, oh boy,
All right, are we ready to roll?
we are rolling.
Are we ready to roll? Are we
Alright,
ready
rolling.
to roll? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, go! All right, well, thanks for coming in today, guys. This is our 8th podcast episode of podcasts
You
that
are
we've
correct.
recorded. And my name is Phil, as always. To my left is,
Zach the Slow Shark.
and to his left,
Josh.
Hill.
Dang it, Bobby. Dang it,
Oh, I
Bobby.
should have done my Hank Hill. Shoot.
that would have been fun.
I did that the other day, but like no one had ever. I was asked that because I like to show it off, and I'm like, "Oh, have you watched King of the Hill before?" No, and then I'm like, "Oh."
You're like, oh,
I just leave it at that.
But it's always fun if someone does know the show and you're just like, Bobby, what the hell?
Dang it, Bobby. Dang it, Bobby.
he had my gut like hurting that one night because I was laughing so hard.
Oh,
when we were playing Evil with a Hand, you just kept doing that.
Who the hell are you? I don't appreciate
Wow, you were like running into people.
I don't appreciate you coming into my house. I tell you what. You got propane? I'm going to politely ask you to leave. Propane is serious business. Propane. I'll tell you what.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are
speaking of
here-
anime,
Yeah, speaking of anime,
King of the Hill, the greatest anime of all time.
we are here to do a podcast about anime and manga, courtesy of
Zach Dubs.
Zach W.
Do
I don't know.
not-
I don't know who that is personally. So do you want to explain?
You were Zach. Zach is a mentor.
He is my alter ego. The other Zach.
the other Zach.
No, so
Zach minus the H.
yeah.
It turns
exactly.
out this is just him who submitted a topic so you could talk about anime.
I just really wanted to talk about it.
It's like when Homer. There's like I can't remember. There's an episode where he's in some situation. They're like, "What's your name?" And he's like, "Ho
Yeah.
No. So you're like, "What's your name?"
Zach. Yeah. All right. So how do I know Zach? So we are a part of. I mean, like all of us are part of it at some point, but I'm still in college. So there's a campus ministry at UW-Madison called the UW Navigators, and I met Zach Willie, our wonderful fan from there, and we talked. Like we always met up with each other, hung out, and talked a little bit about stuff. But recently, I know this is what spurred, I think, this question specifically because we were talking about this when we met up the last time. He only recently, like last spring semester or something, just got into like video games, manga, anime, and he had said he had read through like all of Naruto, and I was like, dang, I haven't even read through all of One Piece. And
That's
One
a
Piece
lot.
That is a lot.
That's a stupid amount of.
That's like
crazy.
700 chapters or something.
That's stupid
like that.
in a derogatory sense. Just stupid as in like that's
Stupid
it's
a
a
lot.
lot. It's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff.
Dang.
to read through all of that. So I know we had a lot of conversations about anime and manga and stuff, and I showed him our podcast, the first, because we did do an anime and manga theme
Anime
podcast
rambles.
Did he send us
uh,
the questions back when we were like
No,
No,
old school pop culture punks or new school pop culture punks?
this
no,
is
new school.
Okay.
Before we launched,
Because he didn't know.
Okay.
He didn't know about pop culture punks at that time. So.
Oh, okay.
But that was one we did with Chris Rogers, and that was a lot of
See
fun.
Raj.
That was still one of my.
He'll be visiting next week
Yeah.
for the Christmas
Chris-
cast.
Merry Chris. Am I still planning that one?
Yes.
Okay.
If
I
you would
can't do
like, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have the time. That should be good.
Sweet. I mean, we can throw our ideas in too.
Yeah, we'll
you'll
just
be
open
the-
up the Google Doc, the Gox,
The
Google-
Gox. The
Google
Gulak.
Docs.
The Google Docs.
The Gooks.
So yeah, I recently, me and Zach always just talk about anime and manga and stuff, and I always try to get him into series, and he's super busy with school and is always like, I'll have to check that out. Then like 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh dude, did you check out such and such yet? He's like, no.
That's how
So
it
much-
goes.
That's how.
That
that's
is,
how I
yeah,
know
that
to
is
him.
the world of the anime manga fan is constantly, have you checked this out yet? No. Oh, you should.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll add it to the list.
Yeah. That I heard that from one. I was watching this one YouTuber named Gyga, who's really, really good on analyzing anime, and he does like some mockery skit videos too. He was talking about like, he was like, and then you add your anime to the watch later list, and once it goes on the watch later list, it falls into the nebulous void, and it will never be found again.
It's very true.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read his email, and we've kind of restructured it so that we have a cohesive conversation,
Yeah.
and we're not answering these questions or talking about these certain topics in order. So
I mean,
this is
it'll be kind of in order.
it.
But
Yeah, I know.
We not rephrased it specifically, but we're more so.
we're pulling
out what we wanna talk
extrapolating topics that he alludes to and kind of building on them.
Yeah.
if that's accurate.
Yeah.
So also, this is a shout out to people we've had. One of our other friends, and granted, these have been friends because we're still starting out and doing this. Who have sent in email episodes, but legit, if you happen to be one of those random people who found this and you're just like, I feel like having my voice heard, like, shoot us an email. TheRebelEthic@gmail.com. That is TheRebelEthic@gmail.com.
RESPECT. What
Tell me what it
is
is
to me at gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
so you want to read the email?
so this is
and then I'll
Zach's
do
email.
like an icebreaker thing, and then
Yep.
we'll
Sounds
jump
good.
into.
Get the ball
Correct.
rolling.
Or do we want? Let's do the icebreaker first,
Okay.
and then we'll jump
Yeah.
into
It's
the
a
topic.
pretty simple one.
So we just wanted to
But I
introduce.
figured it was.
Yeah, we just want to
something fun.
introduce Zach Dubs.
Yeah, so we
for,
got the intro
yep.
in.
Mhm.
My icebreaker thing is a pretty simple one, but if you could be or have any power from an anime or a manga,
Oh shoot!
Yeah.
what power would you choose?
Ooh, that's
It's
really
the classic
tough.
superhero one,
that is
but
a,
it's
that is a
applied
really
to-
good. Oh man,
The one that immediately came to mind for me is in Mob Psycho 100, which is one of my favorite anime of all time. They use like psychic powers and stuff, and I've always loved like ESP and stuff. I always feel like that's such a cool, using your mind and manipulating, just like sending people flying back and forth without even
Yeah.
moving. I just thought that was cool. But in Mob Psycho 100, which is one of the anime I'm hoping to talk about at some point, they use that medium, like that kind of power style, like in really interesting ways. So one of my favorites is there's one of the villains, like he has like a toy sword that he uses, but because his mind powers are so like sharp and distinct, he actually like makes the blade sharp, and he's able to just like have it fly around without him even like, you know, holding onto it, and just so basically he just has the sword like fly around, stab through stuff, slice at people without even moving.
It reminds me of
super sweet.
the guy from Guardians with the arrows. Like,
Yandu.
yeah.
Oh, I love Yandu. He's my all-time. He's one of my favorite. Also, one of my favorite Marvel characters.
His character's very complex.
Oh man.
Different discussion.
Gosh, I got to pick between like 3, and it's like 3 characters from completely different shows. So one would be the alchemy ability in Full Metal Alchemist.
Which alchemist?
Probably Ed, just because I like Ed the most.
Or I would say my second one would be like Roy Mustang.
Yeah,
like
Roy
having
Mustang would
having the
pretty
snap
smoke.
and fire.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Actually, Scar, because since he has, and then from his brother later. So don't
Careful.
don't yeah. So I don't know. So Ed, that would be pretty sweet. There's also Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter.
You want his gum? Would you say the Bunzi gum?
Yeah. No, it's more just his abilities in general. Like he's very quick and super. His aura.
Yeah.
I forgot the actual term in the show.
Oh, Nen.
Yeah. His Nen ability is super OP.
Yeah.
And I think he's a very interesting. He's one of my favorite characters from that show.
Dope.
And it's a toss up in between Zolo and Luffy,
Just
from
being
One
like
Piece.
a master swordsman.
having a gum ability.
Yeah.
Um,
Zolo would be cool though. Just the fact that he literally, I think at this point in the manga and anime, is able to just like slice buildings in half.
Yeah,
just because it's
So and I've always loved Zolo. Is probably one of my all time favorite anime characters ever.
so dope.
Just because I love the 3 sword thing. Was just such a weird.
Yeah. There's this part I would like for you to read at some point, like before the breakup arc, you know, when they get all separated and stuff. There's a really, really, really awesome part with him that like made there's just this one scene specifically, and maybe people who are One Piece fans listening to this might know. There's this one fight he has with one of the warlords of the sea, and like that scene and that whole chapter or whatever made me be like, he stands out. Like Luffy stands out because he's a hero, but I think among everyone else, Zolo just like has this awesome virtue to him that makes him stand out above everyone else. So
yeah, otherwise Ace or Trace. I know he's also known as
Ace.
Is it Ace?
The original is
officially?
Ace,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, otherwise Ace. He was under Zolo, he was my all-time favorite One Piece character. He's so dope.
Dang.
So yeah.
That's a lot of
And
powers.
he handles fire. If I had to pick one of those,
you gotta
I
pick
would
one.
if I had to pick one of those, I would probably say I'm going to say Ed from Full Metal. I dig that. Just like the alchemy
manipulating
ability.
steel and stuff. Yeah,
But I don't want to give
Super
up my
dope.
arm and my leg. So there's I don't want to give up an arm and a leg.
Uh-oh. That's what it costs,
insert
though.
rim
That's what it
shot.
costs. Yeah, I was going to say Ed, but I feel like I would probably just do like Super Saiyan. I don't know.
Oh shoot,
Like
I
Goku,
forgot about
yeah.
the Saiyans.
That is like
Dang.
every young '90s, 2000s kid's dream is to be a Super
I want to
Saiyan.
be a Super Saiyan.
That
So
makes sense.
it's pretty
That's a
basic.
good. I
but it's
completely
like,
forgot
yeah.
about Dragon Ball.
So
Little Kid Buu action.
Hey.
there's a lot of good powers in that show.
Yeah,
But
that
or
shows
Boo in
bananas.
general, just being able to absorb other people's powers.
Turn people
And
into
you can kind of
cookies.
get whatever you want, whenever you want.
Yeah,
That's Majin Buu though, isn't it?
Majin Buu. Kid
yeah.
Buu can't absorb people.
Yeah.
But Majin Buu.
Majin
can.
Buu can.
But yeah,
Yes.
Cool.
sweet. You want to read the
Sure.
thing and then
So
I'll,
I'm
I'll
gonna
start it off?
read Zach's email. All right. So this is his email.
Like psyching yourself up, like okay.
Okay.
Just read
Should we
the
read it in robot voice?
Email. Reading
fellow human.
like Microsoft Sam, just like this is Microsoft Sam.
This is Microsoft Sam.
Welcome to the Pop Culture Punks podcast.
My Rafflecopter goes. Nice little internet reference
All
to
right.
you boys out
So
there.
here is Zach's email that he sent to us in a suggestion for this episode. For the anime episode, I would like to hear about series that should be read versus series that should be watched, referring to watching the anime versus reading the manga. I started reading manga last semester, and I find I enjoy reading manga more than watching anime. So I guess I would like to hear about series where the anime is better or more worthwhile than the manga. I also really like hearing about underrated series and not just the most popular anime. It would be cool if you guys could recommend some anime manga that go against the traditional shonen theme. I like when stories are unconventional, and I'm looking for some anime manga that are different from the typical shonen style. It would be interesting if you guys discussed what makes a good anime or manga. That's something that I tend to think about, and on the surface, I don't really see the appeal to anime manga series, but once you get reading, for me, I can't put them down. So I guess something I think about is why I have this draw to these series that makes me keep wanting more. I know that there is an emotional impact that goes into a lot of series, but not everyone hits me like that. My favorite manga is Naruto. I haven't read a lot of series yet, but Naruto had an emotional impact on me that no other series has done. Growing up, I had very few friends, and I could relate to how Naruto felt growing up. I do have to say, though, that I think the series would have been better if it ended after the fight with Pain.
Yes.
Not to say the Fourth Ninja War wasn't cool and interesting. It's just that Naruto was finally accepted by his village after defeating Pain, which I think would have been a better ending. Plus, the fights near the end of the series felt more like Dragon Ball than fights Naruto had at the beginning of the series. I like when a lot of thought goes into what's happening, and that's the way the fights were at the beginning of the show. As far as anime goes, I have watched 2 anime series, the first being Death Note and the second being the first season of the 7 Deadly Sins. Both were really good, but Death Note is my favorite non-traditional anime manga series. It's so dark that I didn't think I would like it, but I love the strategy aspect of how it and how Light and L are basically fighting each other with their minds.
Dang.
And so from that, we extrapolated a whole outline and podcast worth of content.
Yeah, buddy.
And it's all about anime and manga.
Yeah. So that's a lot of stuff to unpack there. He has a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
But we got it
basically-
out, though. We got
yeah.
out what we wanted to, like, really focus on, that
Yep.
answers, but also, I think, becomes more applicable to everyone else as well.
Yep.
So,
And I
this will be
think,
good.
Yeah,
Because,
you guys have a lot of good opinions about this stuff too. So
yeah, I mean, like, doing that podcast and stuff was a lot of fun, but I think it was much more, if you guys are interested, checking out our earlier anime podcast.
It's technically down, but I think if you
Okay.
Google Pop Culture Punks, there's
it's up somewhere.
it's on
found
like
it.
archive.org, I think.
Yeah.
It's still there.
if you're able to
Yeah.
find it, it was a fun one. Like, I enjoyed doing it, but I think
I wasn't
it
there
was
for that one.
No.
Yeah,
I think that was, we
Christ.
did that one specifically because you were absent.
Yeah, I was like,
it was just
I'm not gonna have
me,
any
yeah,
opinions.
me,
But
Chris.
now that
and
I'm like
you.
the host, it's easier.
Yeah, like you have to be here. So, that one, it was a little more freeform, whereas I like that we're going for a more structured perspective. I think, but it was still good though. We offered up our opinions, but
Yep.
we're narrowing them in a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we
So-
all had very, very, very different tastes.
yeah,
Yep. So-
very different.
And I think even in our discussion today, we're all going to have very, very,
Yeah.
very different tastes.
I think so too.
Which is one of
Which
our
is
discussion
good.
points.
That's the point of the podcast almost.
Yeah, buddy.
So the launching point into the discussion, keeping it short and sweet. This is like a 1 or 2 sentence explanation, just to kind of like get a feel for what's going on. So what initially drew you, like you guys and maybe me, specifically to manga and anime in the first place, as opposed to like Western media? Because obviously none of us are Japanese. So
right. Do you want to start?
Sure.
and 1 to 2 sentences, not
Yeah.
like super, because we'll delve more into it.
Sure. So I think for me, my first exposure to anime technically was Digimon when I was in early elementary school and in the Pokemon show. So for me, I think it was the concept of seeing shows and animation that was very, I don't want to say bizarre, and it was like, whoa, what's this weird stuff? But when you think of like Western shows that were available back then, you had Rugrats, you had a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you had a lot of things that were just so far from Dragon Ball and
Yep.
Digimon and stuff like that. So I think there was a draw to the characters, the worlds, the styles, the personalities.
It was very different compared to those day cartoons.
Yeah, and I think for me too, the funny thing is then after that, I remember being at our grandparents' house one time, and we watched Toonami, and it was like, that was the floodgates opening, and seeing One Piece and seeing Bleach and seeing some of these shows that... Yeah, and some of the other ones. And then, Saturday mornings I started adding anime shows like Ultimate Muscle and
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Fighting Foodons and some of these crazy ones that it was just like, it was whack. But I think it was a draw to the supernatural, some of the supernatural elements, that there's a lot of fighting with powers and stuff like that. So it was borderline superhero.
The power
content.
fantasy aspect.
Yeah. So I think it was cool, just and just the characters too. Like they were just, there was a difference about it that was very appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. For me personally, the earliest one I can remember, Digimon was pretty early, but I remember very vividly going to our library and picking up Sherlock Hound from the library.
Yeah.
That is probably like, I would say legitimately the first anime I got into. So Sherlock Hound, I didn't know it at the time. And it's funny, like I went back to it and realized it. Hayao Miyazaki, who's made Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, Howl's Moving Castle, Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro. He made Sherlock Hound back in the day when he was like first starting up. And he's like just incredible at making these like whimsical stories and whatnot. And I think as a kid, as a kid,
As a child.
I'm gonna try not to do the robot voice so much because before we started recording,
It was a madhouse.
we had a madhouse going.
Anyway, Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Hound.
Sherlock
I mean.
Hound.
Sherlock Holmes.
I'm trying to like keep it concise because, like I said, this is
We'll get into it more as we
Yeah.
go too.
I was monitored beforehand by Phil and Josh saying like just try to keep it down a little bit 'cause, like I go on and on just because I'm an anime manga fan. I noticed as a kid I liked the art style, and that was before like I had a concept of enjoying art. Because as a kid, you're kind of just like, there's that concept of like you just put whatever in front of a kid and then watch it or they'll experience it. But I realized looking back that as a kid, I remember the first episode we watched was that one with like they go into the one town and it's the rich guy with the golden statue and they put the coin in and he's got the giant bank.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid being like, oh, I like the car that they're driving. I've just never seen something like that before. Oh, I like the buildings and stuff look really cool. It was just those things that nowadays I'm able to understand and articulate my feelings on art.
Mm-hmm.
But as that was the first experience where I noticed anime visually being different
Mm-hmm.
from other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then manga, to keep it briefly, all I did was there's the Scholastic book orders, if you ever had that at your school. And there was literally a One Piece book. And I was like, oh, One Piece, because we had watched it on Toonami, and I ordered the book. I think it was in the 5th grade. And I remember vividly being at like, we were going to Stonehouse Pizza. It was like basically like a Chuck E. Cheese place. And all my friends were like in the car chatting up, dancing around. And I was like just sitting in the corner of the car reading a manga
One Piece.
book. And that's how it all started.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
Yeah.
For me, it was classic Dragon Ball Z. I watched Dragon Ball Z on Toonami probably.
mhm.
And at the time, I didn't know that was anime. I just thought it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Like obviously, it looks different, but
No,
as a
that yeah,
kid, I
that's
was
how
like,
it is.
I don't-
Yeah. It
And
wasn't until I
then-
turned like 15 that I realized anime is a
like,
Japanese thing.
It's a Japanese thing, yeah. And then I remember watching Spirited Away on Toonami. That freaked me out when I was a kid. The pig scene at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, that's
freaked the
pretty-
That is
crap out of me.
creepy.
And then the guy with the mask is just like freaky because
Oh,
he keeps
no
eating
mask.
everyone. And then I remember seeing the Chimera episode of Full Metal.
Oh yeah.
So
That's
basically,
another-
like until I got to college, my impression of anime was like
This is freaky.
this is either like super intense, like Dragon Ball Z, or it's just like freaky and like I wouldn't say like demonic, but it was just like horrific to me for some reason.
Yeah.
because that was my only experience with those two like really weirdly spiritual.
well, very strong shows in a film.
yeah.
Quick side note: Josh's neighbors are talking a little loudly outside, so if you hear
I
something
don't
in the
think it's
background,
picking up.
A little
It's-
pitter patter.
then-
But yeah, so I think going into college, my impression was like either it's really intense, like aggressive intense, or it's like really like emotionally intense.
Hmm.
But then I think that's also what drew me back into it when I saw like Attack on Titan, because it kind of combined those two, like horrific and creepy with like screaming and intensity that they have to offer.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I think that's what
Interesting.
drew me back into it when I got into college and was like capable of having complex thought
yeah,
to some
Capable-
extent.
Yeah.
capable of
Not that I
analyzing
think
and yeah.
complex, but
Well, I mean, we took a class, religion and anime.
yeah, which then even opened my
together.
eyes even more, and I was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is like
that was super
rooted
fun.
in things that I had not even understood.
Drawn,
Like comparing Buddhism and Dragon Ball Z and stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, what the heck?
That's
But
possible.
Yeah. So that was like another thing that drew me back into it. But
what was Julian's book called? I have it. I brought it. It was like Drawn to Life, or
does he have a book?
yeah, it was
Oh,
for
dang.
it was one of our class
We
texts.
should rep that. On the
I have it.
podcast.
Yeah,
Okay.
Professor Julian Thomas he was our professor. I think he's at Penn State
Yeah, he's
now.
at,
I want
or
to say
University of Pennsylvania.
University
if
of
that's the same
Pennsylvania.
thing.
I really wanted
And,
to take his class when I came to
he-
I
college.
know
Yeah.
he left right after us.
He left right after us, but Julian Thomas, he like lived in Japan, did a whole bunch of stuff, and I think he's got a couple essays and a book that he published all about religion and anime. And I mean, we're like a Christian podcast, so we're not saying like, oh, he talks about things, but it's very fascinating from a narrative standpoint how he addresses and talks through the cultural things that draw religion, like Japanese religion, into certain anime, but also how at the same time there's people like Hayao Miyazaki who incorporates a lot of religious themes from Shintoism and Buddhism and stuff. Is like, no, it's not a religious anime. Like, what are you talking about? So it's very interesting in his discussion. I remember
Definitely. Class was
super fun.
Plus, we got to watch movies and TV.
Well, I mean, some of the movies I included on the list of things to talk about were actually ones we watched.
That was like a weird
Neon
experience.
Genesis I had to watch, and that, which I was so pissed.
Which is, and we can get into that because I did put that's one of my favorite manga series of all time.
So that'll be a good one.
That'll be interesting.
Shifting from like the culture, like because obviously manga and anime are rooted in like a very different cultural sensibility, including religious and different things. What in your guys' mind defines manga and anime, whether on its own or like separate from like what Western audiences might understand? We'll try and keep this short too, just so we can get into the meat of the questions and stuff.
I actually took a class, and whoever's at the University of UW-Madison, please take this class. It's Adam Kern's class on, it's like just called manga. I think it's like just manga. It's like a lit translation class. It was the most interesting class I've taken at the university. It's so we go in depth with like analyzing manga as a medium and like the cultural context to it, and then applying it to our definition of what manga is, and like kind of changing our ideas and perspectives. And the thing I drew away from that class is that manga in essence is like just visual storytelling and communicating. Like there are differences compared to like Western comics, but I even would say from this class I adopted this way of thinking from even like Marvel comics and stuff. That's a form of manga because it's visual storytelling. It's a narrative and it's in panels, and you follow the panels in order to get the flow of the story and understand the narrative.
Does manga mean something? Is that a Japanese word?
Like manga.
Is that just an English
actually
word?
No, manga is like I'm trying to remember the exact definition, but I'm pretty sure like the definition for manga is basically like visual story. Okay. Something I'm pretty sure it's something along those lines.
Because that's basically what comic is too.
Basically, what comic is.
Manga and comics are almost
they fall hand in hand.
Yeah, it's just Japanese versus Western, sort of.
And there are some differences, like cultural differences, obviously, because like Superman is going to be very different from Death Note in terms of like the storytelling and in terms of character development, and that's just because the West has different styles of writing and different ideas of how they learn to tell stories, whereas Japan is different. So there's that
cultural and everything is
there's
like
those cultural
so
differences,
different.
but I think they fall into place, and like it gets a little muddled if you go too in depth, because then you're like you fall into that problem of like, well, is it comics or is it manga? But it's
just kind of nitpicky after a while.
Yeah, you're getting a little too nitpicky if you're trying to overanalyze it. And then anime, I'd say in short, is just like Japanese animation, because anime itself, it's an animation, and that's why it's called anime in Japan. But like the reason why it's anime specifically is because it's made from Japan, and that is a distinguishing factor. So just because quality is different, and they usually try to be much more. I mean, there are some anime that look like crap, but a lot of them, lot of them try really hard to make good quality, and they just have a distinct style to them compared to other stuff. So
I think in a weird way, there's a lot of people and there's whole classes at UW, and I'm sure across the country, and professors around the world who discuss things like this. But I think at the end of the day, I would boil it down, and there's the more lofty thinkers of anime and manga would probably be upset with the basic boil down of it's essentially comics and stuff, but just with more influence from Japanese culture than in the same way that you wouldn't, like, I don't think of Marvel, like a Batman comic as a manga, but I've also seen people, like that one anime where it's a Batman anime.
Oh, Batman Ninja?
Yeah, Batman Ninja. Whereas like that I would say is like an anime, even though it's an American character. They've created the art style. They've put more Japanese cultural things into the narrative that are focused around that. So I think it just kind of helps. It's a very limiting.
Yeah, they seem similar. Like Western animation and Japanese animation, like they're trying to accomplish the same goal, basically, but they're doing it in different styles, different ways, and different cultural and social.
Right.
At least that's my perception of it.
Yeah, well, even in America too, there's this. I remember I was watching this video about how in the 2000s, most of the cartoons we grew up watching in reality were taking a ton of stuff from anime. Anime influences like Teen Titans. I remember watching, like, when you look back, it's like it's Teen Titans. It was a cool superhero cartoon, but they have all these like all the comedy scenes are like very chibi drawn and like the big faces and stuff or
a lot
the
of
reactions,
over-exaggerations,
the over-exaggerations
and even how it's cut and things like that. Yeah.
But like you didn't think of that as a kid. You weren't like, oh, this is very Japanese style American like American cartoon. But looking back now, and even Megas XLR8 going with like the whole mech story and like a boy and his robot and stuff.
That.
I would love to.
Dude, that'd
that
be
show
fun.
was so great. So yeah. Just taking influences, and it goes back and forth too. I'd say Japan takes influences from America. American can take influences from Japan. With
and I think now
is,
too,
so.
with like a lot of people being more connected than ever. Like
yeah,
you know,
anime's become much more. Anime and manga have both become much more mainstream. I'd say more than ever.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. So,
which
is good.
I would add, so to also preface our further conversation. We're most likely, because obviously we've studied little things about Japanese culture in academic scenes and in our own personal exploration of shows and manga and art and stuff like that. But we're mostly going to be talking about the difference in manga, anime, and American Western cartoons narrative focus.
I don't think we're going to focus too much on like
the culture
talking about Japanese culture because we're not. I mean, Zach maybe more than us, but none of us are academically studied in Japanese culture and manga necessarily. So it's more of like what as a Western audience appeals to us and like what types of things do we draw on and what do we like that's different.
And not even from a Western audience, I'd say like from our individual perspective, because I think that's what happens with even the definition of manga and drawing the cultural background is that it is really kind of on the individual level what you interpret. So I'd say that goes for both like narratively analyzing it and culturally analyzing it. So
it's interesting also because we all come from very different. Like Zach, you're majoring in Japanese. You've lived in Japan. You are a fan of the art style and things like that. So that's more your draw, and you are a fan of the narratives and stuff and the characters. But I think that's more your bend.
That's more what I'm connected.
You kind of dip to that. Whereas for me, from like I'm very into the narrative, like the actual world that anime creates versus Western cartoons and how they structure and tell their stories and have them unfold and fill. I think
I'm more into like world building and aesthetic and stuff. So
definitely,
as well as narrative and art style.
Yeah, and
I think we each have like something that's
a little
important.
bit
puts it a little bit over.
Yeah,
which would be fun to talk about.
So it'll be good to have all the different perspectives.
Yeah.
So speaking of similarities between the two, it seems that the classic debate of the book versus the movie has also moved over to manga versus anime.
That's been a thing.
Yeah,
which is funny. There's always
not that it's moved over, but especially now that it's becoming more and more popular, you have all these people who are saying like the manga's better. And
well, that's like that's a running meme too. I remember seeing like people making fun of some random Indian cartoon that like just looks terrible, and people always being like, "Oh, the manga is better," like stuff like that. So it is like a running joke because it's been so used and it's such a big argument point. But yeah.
So one of Zach's questions was whether there were any anime that were actually better than the manga. Are there any that you guys know of?
So this is
obviously subjective.
Yeah, this is a very, very, very. A lot of these things we're going to be saying are subjective. So we want to make that very clear.
This is our perspective.
This is a podcast. The reason we're talking is because this is what we think about
because
and how
we're very
view
opinionated
and we're very opinionated. Right. We are not speaking as the whole vision of truth,
the whole manga
topic, or
because in reality the manga anime audience is very fickle. So
even just anybody is fickle of any media. You know, there are people who hate like superhero movies now, but I can't get enough of them. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. I think what's tricky about this question is because it is such a subjective question. I think it really comes down to personal taste.
That's exactly what I wrote down.
I thoroughly enjoy watching Attack on Titan. I've refused to read the manga because I know it's ahead of the show, but I have seen the art style and some of the stuff.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it's not as drawn, and not like, and obviously, so it's very different aesthetically, and there's a whole bunch of things in that show. A lot of these things also, a good note is these points will be made about a specific show or a specific manga, not wholly about the whole genre. So for me, I think Attack on Titan should be watched. My opinion of that is because they've added so many things with the 3D maneuvering gear. There's a lot of moving pieces and motion.
You're able to it flows and follows
exactly,
better,
and the actual action and motion and having certain things happen along with music and dialogue and delivery and things like that all just kind of culminate into, to me, in my opinion, a wholer experience versus the manga. And I think I think for me, that's also why, I mean, I am a videographer for a reason. Like, I love the combination of sound
Video
and
aesthetic
video
and
and
sound,
music
yeah.
and all the things that kind of go into each other
Mm-hmm.
and create that thing. And so manga versus anime is going to be very interesting
In a
because
br- yeah,
certain
in a
shows
broad
handle
sense,
it different.
Yeah, in a broad sense, it's really difficult to nail down because both are so different in what they
Mhm.
accomplish and what they're trying to accomplish too. But,
Yeah.
Well, what
and
would you say that manga tends to try and accomplish?
for
Or
me,
what do you most like about manga?
What do I most like about manga? My thing is that manga tends to be much more focused on portraying emotions and specific scenes. So, like you said with Attack on Titan, the emotions like they get intense and like the music and everything builds up to it. But I think it's almost more impressive for me to see the single panel or a single shot
Mhm.
make me feel something, as compared to like all the music and the color and the art and everything
Yeah,
is.
definitely.
It's a restricted medium
It is
almost. Like they have to.
And it's even more
Yeah.
restricted for manga because it's black and white. But
Mhm.
yet I'm still able to like feel the passion the characters. I remember a good example is I was online and on Facebook, the My Hero Academia page, like they do this really cool thing where they go side by side with certain scenes from the manga and anime. And even people in the comments are agreeing that the anime looks great. Like it is almost like as good as it could be as an adaptation. But the manga just has a tiny, like, even if you look at it for a little bit, the manga just has that tiny bit more of like you're feeling something more, which I thought was
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
So
I guess to answer the question, really the only manga that I've read have been a lot of your One Piece. I borrowed a lot of your One
Yeah,
Piece
buddy.
books. And I think what was really cool, especially being a huge fan of the show too, whenever we did get to watch it, we didn't get to watch it consistently, but I think it was really fun to see the action in that show because it is a fight heavy show and it is a shonen.
It's a shonen show, yeah.
But the action is in a way where it's in an emotional, like I just remember, so for a specific example, the group is in Alabasta and they're fighting
Yep.
Crocodile and there's the fight between Luffy and Crocodile and there's just certain panels that like I can even picture now where Luffy's like clocking Crocodile in the face and he, after an impassioned thing of like I hate this and whatever, and you know Crocodile being a giant d-bag and then
Yep.
Luffy just knocking him and then the panel just being
It literally spirals up because he's knocking him like in a spiral direction. Like the viewpoint
straight-
is like you're watching him fly up, even though it's just in one
Right.
shot. It's,
and just
Oh,
like you know
so
even
good.
just seeing like the close-up on people's eyes and it's a very it's super cool and I think it's also why just art and media to me is such a passion to talk about is because you just that like an image of some fake character's eye that just looks enraged and dilated and
Yeah.
open and after a panel of like him clenching a fist and then I see that eye and then I see a panel of this other dude that he's fighting flying into space, none of this of which is in motion and you're just like dang.
Yeah.
Oh
your
my
mind
gosh.
was able to connect and communicate
Yeah,
everything.
it's like
yeah.
it's just such a cool thing. And I mean the same thing with like a show or a movie or even music. But so I really enjoyed reading One Piece. I don't think if I would prefer the reading versus watching. I did really enjoy the show.
I definitely would say reading versus watching.
The problem,
for that one.
the problem
Yeah.
with the show now is there's like what's 800.
It is literally like almost 1,000.
It's almost 1,000 episodes.
That's insane.
So I think
Yeah.
we crunched the numbers at one time at 20 minutes an episode. If you started now from episode 1, it would take you almost like a decade to catch up
Yeah, to like catch
or
up.
something. And that's if they release no new content, which
Yeah,
is only
if
gonna
you like
expand.
spaced it out and stuff.
Yeah.
To answer your earlier question about like anime you should watch versus a manga you should read, like comparing the two, Attack on Titan was one of them. Like the arts, watch it versus read it. The other one is Mob Psycho 100. That was a huge one for me where I was like, I need to watch this versus read this. So the backstory to Mob Psycho 100 is it's by the dude who made One Punch Man. If you guys have ever seen that, I know you watched.
I've
I've
heard
watched a
of it.
handful of
I haven't
episodes.
seen it though.
One Punch Man's like super popular, and I have a little point on that too. I have points about too much stuff. I don't want to take up the whole conversation. To sum it up, Mob Psycho 100's art style, like if you go to the original work, it looks like crap. It is crudely drawn. It is like a 9th or 10th grader went on DeviantArt and was just like doing his own manga story.
Oh dang.
But at the same time, like people love it because the story is just like that good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same with One Punch Man. One Punch Man was originally like this crappy drawn thing, but then he like worked together with this other writing. I forget the guy's name, but he worked with this other like manga drawing studio place, and then they got the whole thing serialized into actual like legit looking manga.
Oh okay.
With Mob Psycho 100, so context, manga is crudely drawn. It looks weird. It's like almost hard to read for me because it's so poorly drawn. But the anime is, I think, next to Gurren Lagann, which is my favorite anime of all
I still
time.
need to watch that.
It's so good.
I promised that guy if he gave me a
Oh,
post.
that's right. At GameStop.
Sorry,
with the-
GameStop guy.
Whatever.
If you're listening to this, I'm really sorry, but
That'd be
taking
really
your
fun. He's like, hey, I remember you.
He
You're the
literally
guy.
grabbed me by the shoulders and he's like, "You need to watch this." I'm like, "Okay."
If you'll let me go.
Just let me go.
so intimidating, anime fans. But Mob Psycho 100, it is one of the most beautifully animated shows. Like I say that with like the most sincerity. I don't say that out of like, oh, it looks really good. I remember
The
I think
ending sequence to that
I
show
showed
is it's
Yeah.
mind bending. How
like the whole glass
Yep.
ending, and I showed you that one fight scene too, where he's fighting the dude in the
Yep.
this like alley. There's this whole psychic fight he has, and only like 2 minutes long, but you're just like, oh, just like I almost say over the top Dragon Ball Z, because Dragon Ball Z fights drag out for so long of punching back and forth. This was literally like bing bang, bing bang, bing bang, bing bang, bing bang, and you're like, oh, and then it ends, and you're like, your hair is like all frizzed up, and you're like,
Dang.
wow. So, yeah, and like I can't really I mean, since you're listening to a podcast, you can't really describe what it looks like, but that is one where like the animation is just so good that you almost have to watch it. And even like the cinematography and the way things are shot and the way characters move and stuff is just so well done that I would always say watch it versus reading it. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's my point on it.
for
I'll check that out.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm gonna jump down a couple questions because I don't want to hang. I think we have opinions about manga, but I think even for you, Z, who've read a ton of stuff, you've
Yeah.
watched more shows than you've read manga.
I
and
would
so
agree
we
with that,
don't
yeah.
have as much insight into like what to watch versus these are just very specific examples.
Well,
that we
I'm more curious, like on if you've done research on things that like you've heard from other people,
Oh,
where
and
the
manga
show
being
is better than the manga, or where the manga is like just crushes the animation.
yeah.
Like things that are critically acclaimed.
There are
aka
some, yeah.
stuff like that.
And I have some examles if I can divulge
yeah,
into that
go
a
for
little
it.
bit before we move on. I'll try to keep it short. The two things I can think of is, so when I remember it was when I came back from Japan, we were just at Barnes & Noble and I was in the mood for like starting a new manga series, and they had Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I was like, oh, Josh, I remember Josh watching that and hating it, like abhorring
don't
it.
watch the show.
Well,
Or at least watch the
Don't watch the
movie
show.
ending where they redid the ending.
Yeah.
yeah, at least watch the good ending. And so I was gonna start reading it, but I was like, oh, but like, what if the show is better? And I looked up online, and I was like, okay, how good is the manga? Everyone says it's faithful to the original, like it's good. But the one thing that stuck out, I remember in this specific review, it said compared to the anime, the story you're able to chew on more, and you're able to understand characters' motivations more, versus an anime where stuff is just flying at lightning speed, and you're just like, at the very end of it, you're like, what just happened? And you're not able to think about it. But with the manga, this guy was saying that you're able to have the time to process and think about characters' motivations in the role in the narrative. And then I ended up buying it, and I have all the books now. I haven't finished it yet, but I plan on finishing the manga before I watch the anime. And it is really good manga. Like, it's super well done in terms of drawing and stuff and everything. So it's a good example. And with anime destroying a manga, I kind of have another example. This is a little bit different. Gurren Lagann, which is my favorite anime of all time. I've said that too many times. They adapted it into a manga at one point. It doesn't come into the US.
So it was like TV show first and then
TV show first, then manga. And there was a dude who's like reviewing some specific stuff, and I won't get into it because it was kind of like an innuendo part. But no, it's no, I can say it. It will just be like,
Oh, I don't care.
there's basically
Whatever.
this one point where like the main character falls on one of the other characters, and it's like an awkward scenario and stuff. But he was showing how in the anime it played out as just this, like, she just kind of smiled at him and wasn't a big deal. Like, he was just a little kid and she didn't make it into this big deal. And it was just like, it almost showed her character being that she was a mature person. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then he said, but then in the manga, they literally twisted and made this total like, oh, she's like blushing. And it's like, oh, what are you doing? You know? And he was like, they just took it and ripped it apart and made the most stereotypical scene from any anime, or, and stuff like that. So I see that as like, even though it was adapted into a manga, it probably looked good, but there's probably some stuff along those lines that just, it became more tropish and it became following the stereotypes that everyone's so used to. So But that doesn't happen for all of them, though. That's the only example I know of a manga or anime being adapted into a manga and having that kind of issue.
Have they tried to do that with Psycho Pass yet? Because I'm pretty sure that one was originally an animation.
I think that was a short novel originally.
Oh, was it?
I think.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. So that's just one example I thought
Sure.
of.
I think the other thing too, so to speak generally, because I don't have that insight, is in my opinion, especially having gotten 2 degrees in very, very, very different mediums, one in English and one in video production, what a show or a visual thing tries to do versus something that's written is very, 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 very different.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how it's executed as well. That's why I've kind of grown to not even take into account people who say, well, the movie is better than the book or the book is better than the movie, because in a way
They're trying to accomplish
they're trying to
different
do very
goals.
different things. And so
Yeah.
for someone who's reading the book, they might see, oh, this scene visually is going to play out in such a more powerful way than this will. And so
And sometimes the problem is it doesn't live up to their expectations.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Or
so-
that scene's not even in the movie because of time constraints. and
Right.
stuff.
yeah, so there's all these things that are taken into account and stuff like that. But I think from our, like, this is going to, I mean, this sounds so pretentious to say, but my suggestion, if you're going to watch or choose between watching or reading something, is really just kind of look at it logistically. You know, I think that's the
Yeah.
hard part is you
That's-
do have to,
Do you have the money and the time?
do you have the money and the time?
Yep.
And do you have the emotional energy too to just like to chew through all this stuff and take it on? The other thing
Yeah.
too is you don't want to have to psychoanalyze every show before you start it or watch it. Like if I had to do research on every single thing,
Yeah,
I'm like,
sometimes just
well, which is
yeah.
sometimes you just
Just
gotta
watch
pick
it.
one
And
Just
I've had
enjoy,
that-
just
yeah.
enjoy
just see where it
shows,
goes. Yeah.
I've definitely had that problem. Is like there's like 3 or 4 shows recently I started watching where I'm like, oh, do I read it? Do I watch it? But then it is the money constraint, because a lot of people just read it online. That's the
Yeah.
big thing. But I personally, part of the reason why I love manga so much is the
Oh,
physicality
yeah.
of it.
They just look so cool and it feels like awesome.
Yeah,
and-
it just feels good to have and read through. That's why
Yeah.
I really don't like reading online. So, but that factors into my manga reading, because if I just read online, I would probably be doing that 24/7. But part of my enjoyment with manga is the physical aspect of it and having a tangible copy. Even like with buying anime and stuff, I like having the series, even if I'm able to stream it like 4 different places, because it's like I own the series,
You
and
own it, yeah.
it shows in my appreciation for it too. So
Oh yeah, give
Just
money to
enjoy.
the people who deserve it.
Yeah,
just enjoy it. Yeah, just
enjoy
check it.
stuff.
Check
Just
it
Yeah,
out.
sometimes
check
just
it
if you
out.
see a show that looks cool, just watch it. Like, don't always
Yeah.
look for people's opinions. And sometimes maybe the manga's better, but you don't have the money to read it
Yeah.
or watch it. And like,
really
enjoy the show for what it is.
And at the end of the day, too, know yourself and what you're a fan of. I'm really I've gotten better at that, but I think I hear people say like, "Oh, this game is so good," and everyone says it's good. And it's like, yeah, objectively, everyone is saying it's good. But then I play it, and I'm like, ugh, I can't stand
That was
this.
not good. Yeah,
You know, so for example, like this is gonna be just quick diversion into video games, but Last of Us. Narrative, the opening scene, oh my
I love
gosh,
that
like
game.
that story was just like that whole scene from a visual standpoint is just unreal, just how powerful and impactful. When I was playing the game, it pissed me off.
Really?
I
Really?
could not play that game. And this is again my own opinion, but the game just stunted my desire to want to play it and to experience the narrative, because it was just so frustrating. Like it wasn't, I'm playing this game that's a narrative and it's like super hard and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work for me, and like half stealth, half action, half all, and it's just like, I'm not jiving with this. I totally agree that the narrative is great, but like gameplay wise, I don't like it. But there are millions of people who would vehemently disagree with me.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, you just have to kind of know yourself and what
Yeah.
you like, because I've told you to try a couple stealth games because I'm like, oh my gosh, I love these games.
And
you
I
try
hate-
and you
I'm
hate
so bad
stealth.
Like I
Yeah.
even gave Phantom Pain a chance and I loved it, but then when it got into the real hard parts of it, I hated it. It was so really bad. And I don't want to diverge too much into
But
video games either.
but anyway,
But it's-
so,
But
it's
with
in that
anime and
yeah.
manga, it's the same
man,
thing.
it's the exact
like,
same
yeah.
thing.
It's in the
I
same vein.
love Attack on Titan. I am not gonna love a slice of life show, and it's not because I think they're bad, not because I think that it's not worth watching.
That's not your interest.
I just I'm not
Yeah.
interested. And then even digging deeper, I like watching the show more because it's action packed, and so I'm gonna watch it versus reading it.
Yeah.
Something like Death Note, which Zach said he already has experienced, like kind of toss up. You know, it's really like, which did you find first,
Yeah.
and like which?
Or if
did you do,
anything, if
so-
you're that much of a fan, just do both.
yeah,
Read and watch it. That's what I'm doing with
That's
Evangelion.
what I'm trying to do with like Death Note and stuff.
Yeah, like with Evangelion, once I finish the manga, I'll probably just go watch the anime. And I mean, that's easy though because that's a shorter show, and I have like I have breaks and stuff in between semesters, so I have that like the open time. But I think in reality, it is plausible to just do both. If it's not like a huge long shonen series, just give both a try and see which one appeals to you more. So yeah,
And if
that's
you're
our-
fine
sweet.
reading online, that's a
Go for
way
it.
easier way of doing it.
Yeah,
But
it is
Yeah.
much easier.
most people do it illegally and stuff, and I'm like,
I like buying so it supports the writers and stuff, and
yeah,
just having physical
Same.
copies.
same.
Anyways, yeah.
You were gonna transition into a
Oh no, I was
Different question or
just
something?
scrolling down to our next point. We're talking now. This is the more theoretical. This is where I get really amped and excited because we're talking
yes
about narratives.
moving to narratives.
Narratives.
Yeah,
So
So-
I will have a lot to say about narratives.
sounds good.
But that's just because I spent 4 years studying what makes a good one.
Yeah.
So
So Zach, he kind of like, not this Zach, the questioner,
alter ego.
Z-dubs.
He
We'll call them
mentioned
Z-dubs.
that he is drawn to. He almost makes it seem like he's not certain what exactly draws him to it,
Yeah.
and he wants to know what we think might be the reason. Like, it seems unappealing at first, and then it draws him in once he actually reads it. And I think probably most of our interpretations of that was that it's like the narrative that draws him in.
Yes, but
Or at least that's what it looked like your notes.
Yeah.
And you might have a different opinion.
I have a little bit of a different
and we can
yeah.
kind of like
We'll
move
divulge
through
from
that
that,
discussion.
sure.
But the way I read it was like he's drawn to the narratives and maybe like the aesthetic of the things too.
Yeah.
But maybe we're all reading our own perspectives into the
Right,
his question
right.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Right.
So we can also dive into like what makes these shows or our favorite shows appealing to us,
Sure.
and why is that good or bad or
Yeah.
Sure. I think so. To start off first, too, I think and I mean this is my. I think I've been thinking about it more in this way. I mean, I also being a Christian, this is why I view it this way. I think there's something inherently in us as human beings that is drawn to stories, whether it's successes or failures or crazy twists and turns.
Mhm.
There's just something inside of us that is like really drawn to that, and I think that is something that across like everyone in humanity likes a story. It might be a political story, it might
Yep.
be a fiction story, it might be a nonfiction story. It's like we just love watching stuff unfold, and I think that's something that we've been designed with. And so I think going off that too, what I think draws us to narratives is there is a subtle, and this is not scientifically based or even in a theory that I can think of or quote, but I think there's something that subconsciously connects us to the people in a narrative. And it's not like, oh, I'm Aaron from Attack on Titan. I think me personally, I relate more to Aaron because I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of fiery and I just kind of do stuff. So, but it's not like that's why I love the show. What I love
Yeah.
about the show is and I think it's also because of how, depending on who you are as a viewer and how you like to view things, if you're really engaged with it, you want to know what happens. Like you, even if
Right.
it kind of sucks, you're like, I just want to know what happens. Does he win? Does he die? Does he?
Yeah.
It's like closure. We have a desire for closure as well. And
Yeah.
so I think in his example of like Naruto, Zach has a personal connection to Naruto as a character. So that's a huge, powerful force in the story.
Yeah, that's already going to guide you to watch it more because
Right.
you're already relating to someone.
Yep.
And on top of that, he's the main character. And I think
Exactly.
you liking Aaron too even gives it more credence to
Yep.
your desire to see the story through.
Yep.
Right.
So
And so from that, I think it's important to know though that there is a part of like what draws us to stories that we're just never going to understand. There's all sorts of theories, and if you just Google why we like stories, there's all sorts of people who will tell you.
yeah. Going down
different
that road is
stuff.
going to go a little too far
Yeah,
off from
it's gonna go all over the place. I think at the end of the day, what you should focus on if you're engaging and speaking pejoratively to everyone who might be listening, the fun part of a story is like it's for a fiction, specifically fiction. It's fake, like it's not real. So there it is fun to invest, and it is fun to like be excited about all this fake stuff that's happening in this fake world, even if it's based in the real world. You
Yep.
know, I think of
you're getting immersed into a world that doesn't exist.
right, even if it's something like Olympus Has Fallen, which is based in actual America, or The Purge, which is based in the United States.
Yep.
It's a fictional, this isn't going to happen. And then there's the other additional, well, I like the idea of maybe what if this did happen? That's realistic. And all that stuff that you pull into it. Yeah. And so I think if you're an active viewer, it's just the nature of watching things unfold and seeing how things go. And even as I studied creative writing at UW, there was an understanding of you have like a story, like there's 7, I think there's a theory that, and I think there's pretty universally agreed upon, but there's like basically 7 stories. There's only 7 stories in the whole world. But what makes a good story is when there's a little bit of each of those types of stories in one narrative. And then, so like for Naruto, it's the hero, it's the rise and the fall, but then the rise and there's the
shonen style.
The shonen. Yeah. But anyway, I could get really more deep and philosophical into that. But at the end of the day, it's just, we just love stuff. I think we just love fiction and watching characters unfold. And I don't want to say we love drama, but I think we love...
People like certain types of drama, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's different ways of creating drama.
Yes.
Like the drama that's created in Friends. No. But then there's the drama created in like a shonen style story that's like, if it's written well, it ties with like the youth narrative of like growing up and overcoming the odds, and different types of narratives like that, where you're like, okay, I can kind of jive with that, because that's what I've similarly experienced, sort of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Sometimes it's just fun to see how crazy things get and where they go.
I mean,
I don't relate to anyone in Death Note, but my gosh, I love that show.
Yeah.
Because it's just nuts.
And I think like the reason that I'm drawn to that show is like the moral implications.
Yeah,
of, like,
exactly.
Well, what if you
you
did start like killing off murderers? Like everybody's like, okay, that's fine. Like they're murderers. But then you kind of keep like pushing the line back further, like, oh, let's start killing rapists. Let's start killing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're just killing detractors, people who are like trying to kill you because you're doing the right thing and they're doing the wrong thing.
And then you're just killing people that you think are a threat.
Yeah.
And then
it kind of raises that moral question of like, how far is too far?
Yeah. But again, that comes with.
But that's the thing
being
I'm
active,
interested in.
right? And I think that becomes with being an active viewer and an active person engaging with a medium.
Exactly.
And I think I think that's why anime fan bases and manga fan bases are a little more passionate and like sometimes obnoxiously passionate than other fan bases, is because there is a personal connection, and then there's an obsession with the personal connection to what a show means or to what a character implicates or things like that.
Yeah, to go off of that, my whole thing, because the way I interpreted his answer about Naruto is relating the characters in anime stand out among any other show or any other like medium, I would say. And well, that's not entirely true, because there are some shows, like I think like Daredevil and Stranger Things, that they do fantastic job of like making you want to know about the characters and their intentions and their morals. But I say with manga and anime specifically, there's a sense that you can get by with, actually I should introduce with what I was going to say before. So one of my favorite series, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, is written by Hirohiko Araki, and it's the longest running shonen series to date, I think. It's been going on since the 80s. Damn. So, and he wrote a book called Manga in Theory and Practice, which if you have any inkling of interest in like manga story and even stories in general and how to create narratives, read his book. It is super, super, super interesting, and I should loan it to you sometime, because he gives a really
100%.
Interesting background on his perspective on narratives. Specifically for manga and anime, he had 4 things that he was like, these are the 4 key elements you need. And they might not all be right, but I remember the 4 big ones that he hinted on were great characters, great setting, great themes, and great art for manga specifically. And that falls into anime too, I think. And one of them might be wrong, but I know those 4 are things that he highlights. And it was interesting. He went into the concept of even some anime get by and do a good job even with focusing on just one thing. So like in Mushishi, for example, one of my favorite animes, it's a show where there's not really a lot of character development. There's not a lot of like, oh, you're following these characters, because it's literally just one dude, and one dude like in different episodes. Apologies for my voice cracking. It's just one guy in different episodes, an episodic anime, but the show capitalizes on its setting. It capitalizes on this like spiritual world that he is interacting with, and that's like the highlight of the show. But it's not it's not narratively strong, or it's not character strong, but it's very thematically and setting is like super strong in that show, and it still gets by. It still does a good job. So I think if an anime and manga can capitalize on one of those, but still write the narrative well, it does a good job. It does a stellar job if it takes all 4 of those and exceeds, and succeeds in making great characters, making great settings, great themes, great art. So, like capitalizing on all 4 of those elements, I think is like a really good, even in our own American comics or something like that. But I think capitalizing on an anime or manga, if you want it to be successful, having those 4 be prevalent and be strong is really, really good. So, or I think is really important to a narrative for manga and anime.
Yeah.
So, and I do have a point. If actually I can move on, if I can do a transition to shonen anime specifically, because I know that was one of the things Zach asked was like
recommendations.
Yeah,
For
he wanted to
the
know
common shonen show.
that aren't the common shonen show.
maybe like shonen that is unlike other shonen, or things that aren't even shonen that are like
I think
also good.
the way
We
he
could just
phrased
do recommendations.
I think we can go both. Yeah, recommendations. I was thinking like both kind of like non-shonen and shonen that aren't traditional shonen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
So my recommendation, the first thing I put on the list is My Hero Academia, which Zach, if you're listening to this, I know I've told you to watch. so I'm calling you out on it now.
Busted.
But My Hero Academia, the reason why I put that on there is everyone and their grandmother is like saying the show and this manga is amazing. And the main reason why people love it so much is because it takes like so many shonen tropes and has a ton of them, but they twist it. They twist it up and they change it up and they still make the story super interesting. So even though it follows like the shonen formula of oh boy wants to be strong, so he like follows after this certain hero and becomes stronger. It has the shonen boy formula, yet it deals with so much other deep elements and deep morals and all this stuff that just makes it so much more interesting. Because like on the surface level, you see it as like, oh, it's just a superhero story. It's basically like Incredibles, but like anime, because it's like everyone has superpowers and stuff like that. It's a society there. The narrative frames like 85% of the world is everyone has like a quirk or a superpower.
Oh, interesting.
But then the main character doesn't have a superpower, and that's what distinguishes him. But he, through meeting his all-time favorite hero, All Might, who he's like looked up to ever since he was a little kid, this guy All Might sees his virtue as a person, not as like him having actual strength, and he says like, you can be a hero. And so he gives him and like he passes on his powers to him, and then that's like the start to the whole narrative.
Interesting.
So if you're a superhero fan, this is like
I really need
right
to
up
watch
your-
that now.
Yeah,
I might have to check that out. Yeah,
We're
that
like,
is-
oh,
it's
frick.
clicking in our minds.
Yep.
We're like, oh, wow,
Yep.
interesting.
Which
Us
is good.
Marvel fanboys are like, ooh.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, and I think that's why I love it is because when it first started, that's the opening, and I was like, dang, this is gonna be good. And then even as it goes on, I'd say like the first couple chapters, I was like, kind of traditional, but like I'm still enjoying it and I still like it. But then I think like when I got to the second volume, I was like, whoa, dang. Like even I think it's like the third volume or the end of the second volume, they meet like one of the main villains of the story, and you're just like, holy crap, like this got real very, very, very fast. And I think that's what I appreciate about My Hero Academia is it's traditional shonen in that it follows the boy becoming a hero, but it's at such a great fast pace. Because that's sorry to complain about Naruto, Zach. I know you love it, but my thing with Naruto is take the original Naruto from when it first started to the Pain arc. That's when he gets accepted. That's like, what, 200, 300 episodes or like 40 volumes of a book for him to get to that place. And that's totally fine. Like, that's a great build up. And it's like a slow process to him being accepted into the Leaf Village. But there are so many elements that me and Josh have both talked about with Naruto that really, really agitate us. Like, so many things that just take so long for him to understand or to form as like a hero and as a main protagonist.
Very unnatural character interactions.
Very unnatural character interactions. Whereas the main character, Deku, has this personality that's just super endearing because he's like, he's weak. He's not, I mean, like with his power, he's super strong. But like, other than that, he doesn't have faith in himself. He's really shy. He starts off really shy. He like, his gimmick is he always like mutters to himself, and he's always like, okay, so if the main hero does this, it's like their power quirk is they actually do this. So if I, try to dodge at this, and he's like saying that to himself, but even the people around him like break that wall and are like, like, geez, he talks to himself all the time and stuff like that. So
Interesting.
and he breaks that trope himself of the main shonen hero, because you think of Naruto, Luffy, Ichigo, what do they all have in common? They all want to be the best at something. They all are kind of outcast to society, but then find that group of friends that makes them better people. They protect said friends. They believe in themselves so much that they're able to overcome any villain. So that's why when I went into My Hero Academia, seeing like, this is a character that doesn't really believe in himself. It's like, but then they build on that so much more, and such a great job. So that's like the perfect example of, if you're like a shonen fan looking for something that's not shonen necessarily, that's my recommendation.
And so I want to chime in specifically because you talked about tropes, and I'm going to diverge into my point, but first I want to address, I think the other thing too is, if you like a shonen thing, they're not, I think that's the thing that's hard to grapple with because of our tastes, is shonen aren't trying to revolutionize my moral code.
No.
By looking, by addressing the world.
Well, it
and
depends on the
things.
thing though, because there are some,
but I think of like, for example, like Bleach. I genuinely, and I know the Bount arc is the most horrific thing that has ever happened, but
like, why?
The first like 70 episodes of Bleach, when they first enter the Soul Society, I love, like, Bleach is probably one of my top 3 favorite shows. The narrative is not good. Like, it's not. Stuff isn't really explained well. The characters are kind of hollow and empty, which is kind of a play on words, I guess, considering they fight hollows. But,
anyway.
Thank you. But I think with that show, though, what I love is it's just obnoxious fighting. And I would say the same thing with Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball isn't breaking any narrative things and making me go, whoa, this story is crazy. But you're just like, I just want to see a bunch of muscly dudes who are throwing fireballs at each other and blowing up worlds. Yeah. But I think the specific thing of the tropes of shonen, and we could have delved into what specific things are kind of associated as tropes with shonen, but one of the big things that you talked about, Zach, is the characters and what drives them and how the narrative unfolds as a result of, in a weird way, it's almost, I think my distaste for most shonen almost comes from the world around them seems to kind of fold and bend in certain ways to allow them to get a little closer to their goal.
Right.
Instead of like Naruto constantly failing and being more hated. There's like moments where he shines just a little bit. Okay, he's a step farther, and then something else happens and the world kind of bends to make it so like, oh, he fights this one person and he's like, yeah, I believe in my friends, and then it's like, okay, he's a little bit more accepted, and it's just kind of the world. And same thing with Ichigo. Like, it's like, okay, Ichigo fights this guy, and he beats him, and he fights this guy.
The world bends around them.
Exactly, the world bends around them, which is to accept them.
Kind of makes sense.
Which is why, for me, I love, and literally why I'm getting a tattoo of it at one point, is I love Attack on Titan.
Which is technically a shonen anime.
Which is technically a shonen anime, but the reason I love Attack on Titan is it sets you up in the first 5 to 7 episodes thinking, oh man, here we go, total shonen show. Okay, it'll be fun, it'll be watch. And it just drop kicks them out the door. Mm-hmm. And then it chases it down the road with a stick. And then it throws that thing. And it doesn't stop. And it's one of those things where that is one of those shows, and I think why for me it's so good is the characters do stuff in the world, and the world refuses to bend to them. Yeah. The world, in fact, pummels them constantly, over and over and over, and every time something good happens. and it's like, but that's one of the things that I think makes a good, and I've heard this even about good narratives in general, whether it's anime, manga, comics, etc. Your characters are volitional beings, and the characters in a show are volitional beings. They're making choices, and that's why we usually get really apprehensive, and us being the pejorative people watching a show or something get antsy about certain shows, being like, why do they do that? It's like, well, for narrative reasons. Like, they gotta, they're trying to get to this point, so for them to do this, that's just kind of like what it goes. But if you listen, I was listening to an interview with Stephen King, actually, and he was saying that he loves the writing process, and why he writes so many books is he'll start a book and he just lets it go where it goes.
Yeah, he
and
doesn't
that's why
outline.
He doesn't outline, he doesn't plan, he just goes, and he's like, well, this character is going to make this decision in this moment. Okay, well, what happens? And it's
like following the chain of thought.
Yeah, and so, for example, and another example is actually Matt Parker and Trey Stone, who write South Park. They gave a talk at New York University for one of the writing classes, and their structure, and this is like a very, very, very simplified structure of storytelling, but essentially it's once there was this, therefore this, but this, therefore this, but this, therefore this. And so that therefore and the buts are there. So it's like once there was think of an anime to use. Once there was a boy who lived in a city and he was an outcast. Therefore, he was chased around town. He was never accepted in what he did, and and he was hated. But one day he tries out for a class. Therefore, he gets in because he tries really hard and people accept him. But no one in the class and so in a weird way, it's almost like if those buts and therefores are always repeating, the story feels stale and it feels empty and hollow. But if it's like that's what I mean, that Naruto and Bleach and some of those other shows, kind of the world bends and allows them to do stuff.
Sometimes
is the but.
But I was gonna make if I can like interject real quick.
Real quick, just to close it out. Essentially, why I love Attack on Titan and why I'm really drawn to a lot of certain anime and manga. I would say the same thing with like Full Metal Alchemist and like Hunter x Hunter and what's the other one that I've watched that I really, really enjoy? Psycho-Pass, season 1 of Psycho-Pass, Death Note as well. To me, what it is that I love about that show, especially Death Note, I think does really well, like Attack on Titan, is the world is set in stone. The characters are interacting with the rules of that world.
Yeah.
They can't break the rules.
Right. You can't break the rules of the world. Exactly. And so, things aren't magically changing to be like, oh, well, that seems, that's stupid. Why did this happen? So that I think is what makes certain shows really good, is it keeps the formula of a story constantly bouncing and shifting, and it doesn't allow the characters in the world to break the mold.
Right. And build off of that point, there was something your whole point about like the world bending to characters. That is the reason I think why One Piece is still going and is still going strong narratively. Because I remember watching a video on that, is that like Naruto and Bleach have just fallen, like everyone collectively is like the Bleach ending was terrible, the Naruto ending was terrible, but One Piece is still going super strong. And one of the things I think is because the world the world is so vast and so grand, and because it's an adventure, it doesn't need to, but also it doesn't bend to Luffy in there as well. Like, think of the whole arc, and this is like spoilers, but this has been a part of One Piece for so long. It's been going on for so long, I can't really. There's a whole part in the series which I knew was coming, but still impacted me. There's like this scene where literally Luffy and his crew are fighting one of the warlords, and they all just disappear. They just like get separated, and you're just like, what? Like you kind of think about that as like One Piece is built into all the pirate crew go on an adventure.
Well, it's crews, like it's a cruise. It's hundreds of pirate crews. Like that's the whole show. Is like hundreds of pirate crews
everyone
interacting.
Interacting, going after One Piece. But then in just one chapter, every single member of his team just like disappears. And like, well, at the time you almost think that they're like erased from existence, or you just don't know what happens to them. But you see that and you're like, is this One Piece? Like, am I still reading One Piece? Because that was like the perfect prime example of that. The narrative was saying that, yeah, the One Piece crew is like is going to be built into like the strongest crew, but the world doesn't bend to them. And as much as Luffy wants to save his friends, he can't always. And that was like I think that was like my favorite part of that whole scene is he's like literally on the ground, like on his knees, and he's crying. He's like, I couldn't save them. And you see all the other, like, you remember all the other times that like he fought the villain, saved his crew member, Everyone was gone in an instant. He was like, I couldn't save them. I couldn't do anything to stop that.
Well, and putting
brilliant.
And putting in that basic formula too, Luffy is made stronger by his friends, therefore he fights with his friends, but one day they all vanish. Therefore Luffy breaks down because he has no support. Therefore, and then it's like, and
you can't just do it. Luffy breaks down, and you can't just do but he comes back and saves everyone. It's like, it's not that simple. You have to make a more.
It's like, but Luffy breaks down, therefore he tries to find them, and it's
a much easier.
That pushes the story forward, and that's
because the but and therefore doesn't get stale if the connections are very like in depth. I think the reason why Bleach and Naruto got so simple at the end is because it was a but this, therefore this, and that's the course of like 300 chapters being condensed into a but therefore. Whereas One Piece, it's much more. That whole span of Luffy not being with his crew is a but therefore sequence, but it's multiple ones, not just like Luffy did this, but this, therefore this, and that summarizes the whole thing. Whereas with most, if a story is very stale and is very, very, I don't know how to say, like predictable, the but therefores are very short in sequence, and that you can summarize a ton of stuff with just one sentence.
And I think to add on to some quick 2 cents, and we'll keep moving forward more into the discussion to get actual recommendations of other shows. But when people say, oh, that was predictable, I think, again, the formula, like you can get a taste for a movie when the formula that but therefore like there's hundreds of other formulas that people use for storytelling. There's the whole like intro, inciting incident, climax, falling action, conclusion, stuff like that, is when what the inciting incident is going to be. That's why I hate romance crap. That's why I can't stand it, because it's just so stale. It's boring. There's no purpose. It's like, it's just dumb. It's like John and Tina are married. Tina meets another nice guy. Tina breaks up with John. John tries to get Tina back. They don't get back together. Conclusion, they get back together. Like, it's things like that that it's so simple. But then I know we've talked in the previous episodes about
there are some things that pull off. I think the reason why anime and manga can be, sorry, I'll let you, like, the reason why I think we had mentioned anime and manga, the reason why they do so well is because they take, like I said with My Hero Academia, they take the very obvious common tropes and turn them on their side, or they tweak them so that it becomes more interesting. So it's not just like da 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 da, oh this, oh they get back together, yay. It's like they give much more depth to characters, much more depth to the setting they're in, much more depth to the world that they're in, that they're trying to become a part of. That's so
no,
I agree with that.
And this was one of the best pieces of advice that I got, and it was very encouraging too, especially as a young and desiring to be writer, from one of my instructors. His name's Jordan Jacks. Check out his stuff. He's super cool, like one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. Very, very brilliant and creative. And he was teaching one of our classes, and we'd have to do one of our creative writing classes, and we'd have to do critiques of other people's stories, and we'd submit them. People would read them and offer feedback, and he would never pick apart and say, well, this didn't work, this is bad, or this didn't work, this is good. He would specifically go to something. He's like, everyone read the sentence that this person wrote, and everyone's like, what's the deal? He's like, isn't that weird? He's like, that's so weird. Like, why is that? He's like, that is the story. He's like, that is what makes this so interesting, is it's so weird. That's bizarre. That's freaky. He's like, play up the freaky weird stuff. And and it's like, and I mean, I'm condensing the whole discussion and I can't even think of the word, rephrasing it a little bit to fit the story, but it was like, what makes a story interesting, and like focus super intently on what makes that story interesting. And in doing so, you play up the whole reason people are engaged with this in the first place, and I think bad stories and not, I don't want to say bad as if it's, objectively bad, but just things that tend to not be as popular because of their quality usually tend to not have very interesting things happening, or people start doing stuff and they don't focus on the interesting thing. Yeah. That's why I hated Batman versus Superman. The whole interesting point is you have Superman as a being is indestructible. So what happens when he's surrounded by a whole bunch of people who aren't indestructible, and a whole bunch of people who are very skeptical of this spaceman who is indestructible, and who's like saving people. The interesting thing, they didn't capitalize, and it's like, that's freaky and it's weird, and like, what would people do if like all of a sudden there's this dude, and what if they were a little agitated because they're like, I don't really trust this guy, but they don't do that, and they make it weird, and they make it, and they focus on
weird
stuff,
in a bad way,
right? And they make it, they focus on the stuff rather that's boring and isn't very interesting. And so I think that's like what Attack on Titan does really well. Full Metal Alchemist is just insane in like where it goes and all the stuff that it does. Psychopaths, trying to think, Hunter x Hunter is really awesome. It's not as dark, but just how the narrative there's a section of it, parts, though. Yeah but there's a lot of really cool, like, I think if you start looking objectively at things that are succeeding, you will notice the trend that there is a depth, and there is not everything is like, oh, I'm going to subvert the I had another instructor call it I think it was actually Jordan Jacks as well, who called it like the Inception syndrome, where like after Inception came out, he had a whole bunch of classes where everyone was like, oh, I'm going to try and pull the Inception card on you. Like, is this actually reality? Is this actually this? Is this actually happening? He said, instead, just tell your story. And tell your story and tell the interesting things. And like, if people are constantly looking for what's the catch? What's the thing that's going to happen? Some stories do that phenomenally. Yeah. Some stories try to do that and they're awful. Some stories don't even touch it, and they're the greatest stories that have ever been told.
That's true. Yeah.
So
like a story that's not capitalizing on the big twist. That shows that is like a truly good narrative. So All right, what are we moving on to? Is there?
Yeah.
we could
I told you
literally
I nerd out about stories.
No, I
love
feel the same
stories.
way.
I think maybe general suggestions now
Yeah, that's
of
a good idea.
things that we've things that we've specifically watched or read
Yeah.
that we would recommend
Phil,
to,
what do you?
to Zach,
Yeah.
or just in general things that we enjoy,
yeah.
and then also maybe things that we want or hope to read or
In the future. Yeah.
watch in the future.
Definitely.
You should. I want you to start off because you haven't gotten to say much this podcast.
Well, you
Um,
specifically in the context as being also
recent manga.
a late bloomer to the
Yeah, I'm similar to Zach.
late
in that way.
bloomer, if you
I didn't
will.
like.
late bloomer.
I think the things that I've read, I haven't read a ton, but I've been reading Monster, and
It's really, really good.
so good, so good.
Basic 2-sentence premise.
Basically, I mean, it's so I can basically say the beginning part without really spoiling too much. But basically, it's this doctor who is faced with a decision between saving somebody really important or saving a child who he was originally already saving before this important person came in. And it's kind of like, you will lose your job if you don't save this government official, basically. But he's like, no, I have a moral duty as a doctor to save this child.
And he came in first and stuff.
And the
like
child
that.
was in first. He was already in the surgery room. And basically the hospital, and so he doesn't. He saves the kid.
But he loses his job.
And he basically loses his job. He like gets ostracized from society. And it basically becomes, I don't want to spoil it, because there's a little twist that happens in the first book. And then it kind of just keeps unfolding.
Yeah.
And keeps like, you're just like, the thing that you think is really happening is not happening at all.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the reality twist, but it's just like constantly unwrapping what is happening.
Yeah.
to
The truth.
and then you're like,
yeah.
frick, this dude's wrapped up in an
Yeah.
conspiracy that's like deeper than I ever thought.
And
it
out
would
of
be
all
wrapped
of
up
the
in.
manga and anime stories I've read, this is the best story that capitalizes on understanding the mind of a truly evil person.
Yeah.
Which is like, stories do that all the time, I feel like, but Monster does the best job of like, you are getting almost like a first-hand look at
like
a
true
modern day
pure
true
evil, yeah.
evil person.
And it does it by making you think like certain people are good, certain people have good intentions, and then subverting that, and it's like it creates this whole like evil good.
It's so good.
And I haven't
Yeah.
even finished it yet. Like I'm only like 4 books in.
And it's
I think.
very realistic too. Monster's one where like if you went to a person who was like, isn't like anime manga just like giant robots fighting each other and like tentacle monsters and stuff?
like read Monster.
You're like, read Monster, and you show them that like that will give them a dose of reality.
And it's also a
So-
show, but it's very hard to find unless you just
Yeah.
stream it online illegally. But I also
And the
don't
manga
really want to
also
do
Which
that.
we
has-
don't condone. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
And the manga also has like 3-in-1 books.
Oh, does it?
It does have like the ones we've bought, like the signature
the perfect
editions.
editions.
The perfect editions I think are like 2
Yeah,
and
there's
3
a
books in
total
one.
of 9 volumes in
And
the
it's-
perfect edition.
It's so good.
It's so
Yeah.
good. It's expensive though, so I haven't finished it yet.
Mhm.
But I'm hoping. I think I asked for the next 2 for Christmas, so I'm hoping I get those,
Oh, I should have.
and then I'll just round out the last 2 and finally have the full set and finally finish it. But it's just like it like blows my mind as far as
Yeah,
like a manga.
it's
I'm
really
like, wow,
good.
this is insane. That's not shonen though. That's whatever the next
It's
young
kinda,
adult.
It's
like
seinen,
seinen, whatever
yeah.
it is. I think that's what it is. I've been reading Full Metal as well, but that one's also restricted to money reasons.
One
Did
Brotherhood.
you watch Brotherhood?
I watched Brotherhood.
Also note to Zach and to anyone who is new to manga, but after listening to this is kind of interested. First off, congrats. Take the jump.
You've made it all the way
But also,
through.
so there's 2 versions of Full Metal. There's Full Metal Alchemist and then Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
in the anime.
In the
For the
anime.
anime.
The anime, yeah, the books are
Brotherhood, watching it is better.
Yes.
It
but-
follows the books more.
People, yeah.
Yes.
Some people have said the argument that they make is because I actually a lot of people have asked me that question, like, oh, do I watch the original or watch Brotherhood? Some people say watch both, and like that's okay. You can watch Brotherhood first, though.
Yeah.
Make that your priority because I think the reason why people liked the original so much of Full Metal Alchemist was because that was what was available, and like they didn't have the context to what the narrative actually is. Because
Mhm.
Brotherhood, the whole story with that, to be really quick, the original anime that was coming out was going faster than the manga was, and that happens all the time with anime shows. So they had to make their own ending and wrap up the story in their own way while the writer was still writing the manga. So it had.
And from
it
what
has
I can tell, it diverged a lot.
it diverges a lot. It's really bad end. I won't spoil it if you want to watch it. I really, really don't like the ending. But with Brotherhood, they redid it in 2011, and they redid the whole series, and they followed the manga to a T.
That show is so
I remember
And
when
it
I
is-
when I
oh,
finished that show, I was just like,
Frick.
I will never watch anything
Yeah.
that made me feel the way I do right now.
and it is
Yeah.
the most sad out of anything I have read, and I haven't finished a lot, so that's not saying much. But it has the most. We can testify the most satisfying ending to.
It gives you
anything.
like such a strong feeling of like brotherhood and like why you're like willing to die for people like and
Yeah.
stuff, and like why you're willing to like go the distance for people that you like have their back, and like
Yeah.
and the world is just like it's the idea that like the world is unrelentingly like harsh towards its characters.
And this is like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, along with Gurren Lagann, I've said on here, were like what I said before about having great story, great themes, great setting, great
Yeah.
art. Like that capitalizes on all four
Mhm.
things. That's why it's like right next to Gurren Lagann is my favorite anime of
Yeah.
all time. So
So yeah, that's Brotherhood. I've been trying to read that one, but haven't finished it because of money. I've watched Brotherhood, one of my favorites. I've watched Death Note. I've watched Attack on Titan.
We watched Psychopath season 1.
I watched Psychopath season
I haven't
1,
seen
which
season 2.
I loved the villain in that show.
Yeah.
I've
He was
heard
just
season
so like
2 is really-
ideological.
See what?
I've
About
heard season two like doesn't like it ruined the show. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard.
Timmy told us not to
Same,
watch
yeah.
it, and we're like, all right, I guess we'll listen to you.
Yeah, but
Um,
after finishing season 1, I was like, I'm good. Like
Mhm.
this was, there's enough closure with it that you're like, I don't need to watch more. Like
That's good.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
It's not
Mhm.
like, oh, but I want to see what happens. It just kind of like, this is good. This is good. That's a dope show. I think it's on
I
Netflix.
still need to watch that too.
That's a good one.
Netflix.
Also reading, I have read like half of the series called Bakuman, which is about two guys who are
Yeah.
writing. They're like trying to write their own shonen manga.
Mhm.
I thought it was good, but at the same time, it's pretty simplistic in the sense of like they succeed when you think they're gonna succeed, and you can kind of predict. It's
a little
pretty predictable,
Yeah.
but it's still like interesting because it kind of gives you a little bit of insight into like
Yeah.
the shonen
What even like
world and,
breaks?
like,
yeah. Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, it's
you, but
okay.
it like breaks the wall of like you're reading a manga about people
writing a
manga.
manga.
It's like
Right.
breaking
Yeah.
out
A slight. I mean, this is a corny reference, but
Inception.
it's like a Deadpool.
Deadpool. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
you're like he
it
knows
breaks
he's a
that fourth
superhero
wall
and he
a little
knows the superhero formula, and so he's gonna make fun of it.
Mhm. So it's
You-
interesting in that regard, but I haven't finished that either because of money. So
Did you ever read what's that manga where Jesus and Buddha are?
Oh, I have
Saint
read
Young
that a little bit
roommates?
on
Saint Young
online.
Man.
Yeah, Saint Young. What is it?
it's like Saint Young Men, I think, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I read like the first couple.
It
pages
is
of it.
very
It's-
good.
It's pretty
actually
funny.
really
yeah.
funny.
It's very interesting because
Actually-
they have like all these little jokes and quips about like
Yeah.
perceptions about who each of the people are.
Mhm.
And Buddha will be like, "Hey Jesus, I thought you were this." He's like, "No, that's just what people think." And it's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
it might be a little racy for a Christian reading it, thinking
No, but,
like,
like,
you're kind of
I
making
Yeah, it's
fun of
good
me.
for people.
But it's,
No,
I thought
but
it was
even-
funny
chill out a
because
little
it's like
bit.
you kind of laugh about
Yeah.
yourself a little bit.
Even that, I think it's fun though because it's like you think about it and you're like, yeah, that is kind of true. We do like our human nature is to perceive Jesus as this. Like one of my favorite things. It was a scene we actually talked about while I was in Japan with a bunch of friends of mine. It was by the guy who made all those short movies and stuff and won like the movie awards. I don't think I mentioned him before. If you guys can find his stuff, I don't know where to look, but his name is Yu Shibuya, and he's this filmmaker. He's a Japanese filmmaker I got to meet in Japan. He's this Christian guy. He's super amazing, dude. I only say that just to give context to like we talked
Sure.
in the Christian context about non-Christian stories and narratives, and he was even brought up like Dragon Quest and Shin Megami Tensei and Persona and all that stuff, and was saying like you can pull Christian elements from this stuff. And it's not to say that these works are Christian works, but it's that it is in our nature to almost push those things away because they're not Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, we can actually better ourselves and better understand stories by analyzing this kind of stuff. And with Saint Young Men, one of my favorite things that he pulled from and we talked about is there's this whole scene where like Jesus is like, man, like every time they picture me on a cross or something or in those paintings, I look sad. Why am I so sad? I always look like I'm not happy. Like I died on the cross. Like I wanted to do it. I don't know why people made me look sad. And then
Mhm.
Buddha was like, yeah, they always make me look fat. Like why does my statue always look like some chubby dude and stuff like that? So it's
That's awesome.
it's brilliant. So
yeah,
yeah,
I
that's a good
remember
one.
reading because I think Jolien mentioned it in class once, and I'm like, that sounds kind of fascinating. So I remember I looked up the first book or something, and I read through it, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because it's like social media. Jesus is on like social media and stuff, and it's like he's like a personality, and it's just like an interesting commentary on like religion and stuff.
Yeah. But I mean,
So-
I think that's why, again, that's one of the reasons that we enjoy doing this podcast is we enjoy talking about the depth of things. And I think there's this weird, and it's not even just, I mean, we all come from like Christian backgrounds, but I think there is even like a we're watching it right now with the Detroit Become Human debacle, where people are like, well, you can't depict this thing because people are going to start doing that, where it's like the whole, did you hear about this controversy?
Yeah.
And people are like,
But
well,
I watched the Boogie video about it.
if you're like, well, and Boogie did a great video on it too.
Boogie2988.
Yeah.
Check him out.
Super
he
good
has a
dude.
really great insight, and I really appreciate him making that video talking about it. But he basically just picks apart, like, why are politicians and other people so obsessed with, like, well, if you see this thing, it's going to make you do it. Like, I mean, maybe to someone who's deranged, yeah, but there's bigger issues than, if that's the case, then there's way bigger issues than this person.
Yeah, if somebody's beating a kid up because of a video game, then we should be asking the question about why they're doing that in the first place, not changing video games to cater to those crazy people.
Or what their point was, which is the British politician's point, that, well, we don't want to condone violence against the perpetrator because that can actually make it worse for the kid that's in trouble. It's like, no one's saying that. Again, it's like why I talked back to, like, when I mentioned way earlier when we were discussing narratives, is that it's all fake. Like, it is fake, and it isn't healthy when you start injecting fakeness into a world that's not designed for that.
Yeah.
But
is it the creator's fault that you're making the narrative a fake narrative reality? Is kind of the question.
Well, I think even deeper, the question is a story going to actually make you do something? So, like,
well, that's totally different.
That's a whole, it's an age old. But anyway, so essentially with that, I think that's why I've really loved different shows and seeing, just the theme. I think, like, I love themes, and, like, that's why I'm obsessed with, like, tattoos and logos and stuff. I love kind of a message that's just from, like, one core idea of something. There's, like, a bajillion things that explode off from that.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, I just wanted to side rail on that. But
I'm trying to think of other
any
things.
other things that
I've tried watching, like,
what's like a recommendation you have?
I mean, anything I've
Just
watched,
anything you watched
I'd
already.
recommend. I'm trying to think of things that I want to watch still. I need to watch that Gurren Lagann show that everybody keeps telling me to watch. I tried watching that Sword Art Online because I thought it was a cool concept, and then I was like, this is a little bit too, like, kidsy for me.
Everyone has very mixed feelings on it. So
I think for me, like, it's kind of like the Rick and Morty situation where, like, a lot of anime and manga fans kind of, like, throw me off from things because it's like people, like, talk about, like, waifus and all these things of, like, they're, like, married to anime characters and stuff, and it kind of, like, part of me is like, I don't want to participate in that culture, but at the same time I want to enjoy, like, the medium, and so I kind of, like, step back a little bit, and but there's certain things I want to watch.
Side note on that, if you get into a show that, like, you've heard has a really bad fandom, just don't interact with it. That's like I really get upset when people talk about it. I remember, I really shouldn't, this is gonna digress into video game. I'm trying to think if there's an anime. Well, there is this guy was talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and how, like, all the fandom is doing this and stuff, and it's like, that shouldn't ruin the work for you. It's not JoJo's Bizarre Adventure's fault for people being stupid online,
being weird.
It's like that's totally on them.
Exactly.
And so they're like, don't put yourself into those fandoms. Like, just detract from it and enjoy the work for what it is.
Exactly. Which is basically what I try and do. Yeah. I just don't have time to watch a lot of things because I mostly watch, like, if I can watch TV, I'll watch, like, Punisher or Daredevil and those types of things.
45-minute episodes.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot of time to divest into watching TV or invest, not divest.
I like that, divest. That's gonna be our episode name is divest in anime.
Divest in anime. I think that means to get out of watching it. I'm trying to think of other shows that I want to watch. There's a book that I'm actually reading too. Is called Pluto maybe?
Oh, Pluto, yeah.
It's kind of like a retelling of a certain arc in Astro Boy.
Interesting.
But it's written by the same guy as Monster.
Naoki Urasawa.
Yeah.
Like, read anything by him. It is good. 20th
Century Boys. That's another one I want to read. Yeah.
He wrote Monster, 20th Century Boys, and Pluto. And 20th Century Boys is one of the ones I was going to recommend. Yeah. It's super, like, probably between that and Monster, because, like, both of those are, like, tied for probably third place. It's my favorite manga. 20th Century Boys sticks out a little bit more in terms of, like, the narrative it has, because Monster's grounded in reality, which I love and appreciate because you're looking at the psyche of villains and villainy and good and evil. But 20th Century Boys has the tiny bit of fantasy to it, which I love in works. And it just
I love fantasy too. Yeah.
Does a great job of storytelling and going back and forth between the past and the future. So should I just start into my list?
Yeah, you go
Were
first.
you good? Or
yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so are we just saying, like, what we've watched and read?
You could do things you
yeah,
recommend that
We've
you
been
just do-
going for
yeah.
a while, so do like things you recommend. I know there's probably a ton that
I have way
you
too
want
much
to
stuff,
watch,
yeah.
but I would just maybe add in from your perspective, because this is what I'm going to do too, is I haven't seen a ton of manga, but I'm going to kind of gear my recommendations for certain narratives. So if you like this kind of narrative, this is a really good show. If you
Yeah,
like this kind of
I can do
narrative,
that.
do that.
Yeah. So I wrote out my top 5 favorites. And I've kind of, and like if you've gathered whatever like stuff I like in narratives and stuff, you can kind of glean whatever you want from these. So top 5 favorite manga, One Piece is at number 1. I think that has the nostalgia value to it on top of just being a great narrative. My Hero Academia, then 20th Century Boys, which I mentioned before, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and then Tokyo Ghoul, which is very, very, very good in terms of like if you want a darker story, then if you're looking for a darker story with a little more grittiness and a little more depth to the characters, no, because shonen characters do that. Just if you're looking for a more darker, more intense story, Tokyo Ghoul
With
is really,
like
really good.
some supernatural borderline
With supernatural
power abilities.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So top 5 anime: Gurren Lagann's number 1, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Hunter x Hunter, and Samurai Champloo, and then Attack on Titan. So out of those, out of the manga and out of the anime. So recommendations for manga, if you're looking for something traditional and something like that you like is kind of not an easy read per se, but is somewhat simplistic but is good. My Hero Academia, it has a really complex, it starts off simplistic, goes very complex, and I think that's like the best kind of narrative, because you get accustomed to the world, but then it changes up everything. My Hero Academia I recommend for anyone who's like in that state of I've watched Dragon Ball Z, but I'm not really into anime anymore.
Mm-hmm. Like a transition.
A transition one, yeah. For anime, I would say, depending on your age group, if you're a younger person, Hunter x Hunter, 100%.
Fantastic show.
That is like, people say is like the pinnacle of shonen anime, because it is. It kind of does the same thing as My Hero Academia. It has shonen tropes, but it goes very, totally different directions.
Go on.
If you are not really an anime person, I recommend One Punch Man, actually. That is one that...
I feel like... Yeah,
I'm gonna go down that road.
Yeah,
I
figured
you've converted like 8 people.
I've literally turned anime or very vehement non-anime people into anime fans via Attack on Titan. Including our father.
I was gonna leave that. Well, actually, that was me, but I was gonna leave that to you because I know you were gonna mention it. One Punch Man. The reason why I recommend that is I actually wrote out one of the reasons why I thought it'd be perfect for people is. One Punch Man is perfect for the boy who grew up watching DBZ and now is just a normal adult in human society and like has no interest in anime, no interest in stuff, but remembers how much he loved the crazy action stuff in Dragon Ball Z. Because One Punch Man is perfect in that I think it almost capitalizes on those people. It's a story that anyone can watch and enjoy, but for people that grew up being like, oh man, all the crazy fights, but it just got way too over the top because they're adults now and they're like, man, I can't believe I watched that stuff. They go in watching One Punch Man being like laughing their butts off because it's like this dude just destroys everything and has no, and that's like the interesting part of his character is that he's so powerful, everything dies in one punch, and that just develops. I think you as a viewer, if you're used to the power fantasy and stuff of Dragon Ball Z, that's like an interesting question as an adult posed to you being like, well, what if you were just so powerful everything died like in one punch? You're like, huh, yeah.
What I think that's kind of what I was alluding to with the Superman thing is it's almost a Superman case where he's so powerful, but they take the humorous route and he's like bored. He's just like, I guess I got to fight this guy.
Yeah,
that'd be like if Goku like was just like, I guess I'm a god now. I can just
kill
people.
This Frieza cat. He's been around a couple times.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my recommendations. So Hunter x Hunter, One Punch Man for anime, and then for manga. Oh, there's anything recent? Okay. Recently, I started watching Blood Battlefront Blockade, and really quick to summarize that, I can't describe the narrative because it is kind of all over the place, but the show doesn't that's one of the examples where it doesn't capitalize on the narrative. It's very much the characters in the world that you're just like, you just want to see interact, and you just love following them around because it is like them having their everyday roundabouts and doing stuff. Mm-hmm. Apologies for my voice cracking. I know it's the second time apologies, but I keep being like, I love anime. Oh, anime. that's one where it's really interesting, and I recommend it if you're a fan of the Cowboy Bebop formula where it is episodic, and there's a lot of really good anime with that. Samurai Champloo is the same way. There's like a stringing narrative, but most of the episodes stand alone. Blood Blockade Battlefront is I highly recommend. And I've actually been watching The Ancient Magus Bride, which is a romance technically,
Oh, interesting.
but is very, 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 very good, and I love it a lot. People have been saying if you're a fan of like the Harry Potter and the fantasy world building, like that kind of fantasy building and like wizardry and stuff, that is like the perfect transition into anime manga is what people have been saying.
Interesting.
And it is really good. And I think the reason why I remember you were like, oh, I hate romance and I hate stuff. I had just watched an episode before coming here, and it does I recommend that if you like. I actually was showing one of my friends who wants to get into manga. I know she's kind of likes the girly stuff, and I was showing her that, and I did that out of like, oh, this is girly, so read this. I actually did it out of, I know this narrative is really good and has a really good job of character building and making people interesting, but not being this sappy, like, oh, she falls in love with, the random stranger. Because the whole start to the thing, I'll give the premise, is she basically is like, she basically gives up on life and is like, doesn't want to live anymore, but she doesn't know what to do. And she literally like sells herself as a slave. But then she's like at this auction, and this dude who's like known as this like famous wizard and mage is like, I'm going to buy her, and for this huge, huge sum of money. But he like takes her in and is like, I'm going to teach you how to be a wizard, but you're also going to be my bride and stuff like that. And she's just like, okay. Like is kind of going along with it because she doesn't have any other home to go back to, no other past to really follow. And so she's just like, I'm just going to see what happens with this basically. But also it dives into the world she interacts with, makes her realize more about herself. And being with this dude who randomly bought her at this, this auction, even though she gave up on life, actually wants her to pursue something. So that's where like the love story is like, that's really good.
Well, I was even gonna. Are you good? Because
I'm good.
I'll probably take off from that point too. So, one, I would highly, 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 highly recommend you watch at least a few Hayao Miyazaki films.
Yes,
those are.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about him.
I know
today.
we haven't even. That's a whole.
That's a whole different
on
podcast.
itself.
We haven't talked about films. Anime films are.
Yeah,
very
I think the
different.
reason I incorporate that in though is because I think with Hayao Miyazaki's his storytelling. You watch a Hayao Miyazaki film for the narrative and for the art.
Yes.
I think for me, one of the reasons I've really appreciated Hayao's stuff is he does a really good job of balancing an interesting world with interesting characters, with not crazy twists and turns, but just like you just want to watch what happens and you're just like enjoying the journey.
pleasing.
It's like a journey.
It's
You're
just a
watching
journey, and it's like it's super
Yeah.
entertaining. I remember we showed that to it was my grandma and my mom and dad. I was a little nervous about showing them an anime movie, but we watched Castle in the Sky, and they were like, that was really good. Like, they really enjoyed it as a movie. And it was because they were able to pull out the elements and see the good stuff in it, because it's just well-rounded films. Side note, watch Kimi no Na wa. That's an anime film I recommend.
Sure.
So anyway.
But yeah, no, so I think with that, Hayao Miyazaki stuff is just fantastic. And I actually really like how he uses romance relationships in his films because... And again,
they're not
I
corny.
have no
They're not
problem
really...
with romance in films because there's a part. I think there's a weird narrative thing that we like seeing the guy win or the girl get the guy. And I think with like Howl's Moving Castle, for example, I love Sophie as a character and I love Howl as a character. And there's a point where you see there's like, yes, like you're designed for each other, but Sophie's like, no, I'm too, like I got stuff to do, and Howl's like, I got stuff to do, and so all the things that go on. But I think I get agitated with the Bachelorette style.
Yeah, like
romance.
unrealistic.
Exactly.
Because like realistic
Un-
relationships
yeah,
can
unrealistic.
change and mold the character's motivations, and like that's how it is always superheroes.
Yep.
Like the romance is always what's pulling the superhero from their duty to like protect the world or just protect this one person.
Right.
So
it can, like, romance stuff can be really interesting and really cool. And I think even for me, like, that's one of the payoffs that I love about Full Metal Alchemist is like just Ed and Winry.
Dude,
like,
you wanted it to happen.
yeah, it's like because I love Ed. He's like my favorite character in that whole show. And there's like, but he's just like dweeby kind of alchemist kid, and but then
Always
there's
saying, like,
so
goofy
so
things,
like
which
that's
is
one of
like,
those awesome things. But definitely recommend Hayao Miyazaki films. I would find one with a premise that sounds interesting
That
to you.
suits you, yeah.
Because there's some that I really didn't like. Princess Mononoke. I really didn't like.
is that the one with the Beatles?
No, that's
Or is that the Wind
Nausicaa,
Valley
the
Wind?
Valley and the Wind.
That
I
is,
didn't like that one as much.
which is
Yeah, I
fun.
didn't
That is
either.
like my favorite
I
Hayao
didn't either.
Miyazaki film. Actually,
Wait, was
Mononoke was with the wolves, and it's like
oh,
the
like the
steam-
industrial
Yeah,
society
yeah, yeah,
versus
yeah.
nature?
I wasn't really
Yeah.
a big fan of
That
those,
one-
but
yeah.
Howl's Moving Castle, I really enjoyed Spirited Away.
I'm a huge fan of that
um,
one.
I'm trying to think of any
Castle.
others that
I
I've seen.
recommend my personal recommendation is
Castle
Castle in the Sky.
is
That's
really
my
cool,
favorite.
too.
It's just that one is just a great like you just feel good. It's like just a great. It's how I felt with Sherlock Hound at the very beginning. Is like the art style is great. I love steampunk stuff, and then that narrative is just fun. It's just a fun journey to go on and see through to the end, and it's well rounded. And yeah, Miyazaki is a creator. I could go on and on. 'cause-
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna hijack so we can close out.
finish
But
this. How long have you been going on for?
so we're almost at 2 hours.
Jeez.
These are not in the order of how much I like them. These are based on shows that I have watched, and I think if you like a certain style, you might appreciate the show. This one is number one, and I have to talk about it first because it's my all-time favorite ever. Is Attack on Titan.
Well, it's what got you into writing.
It is.
So there is
Yeah, I mean, Attack on Titan was what basically sent me into an English major and specifically creative writing major. But I think the reason it was so good is I've never watched a show before and felt like sick, and just like sick of like the hopelessness that is just pulling down that entire world.
And there's one
everyone in it.
specific moment you are specifically hinting at that people should watch and so then you can go home and watch it and be like, that's what he was talking about.
Yeah, and I think, and I am gonna. It's in the first episode, so I'm gonna talk about it because I think it's just like it is. If you really don't want to hear about it, then just I don't know, skip ahead a few seconds or a minute. But it's in the first episode, the Titans invade the wall, and Eren and Mikasa are going to find because they see that his house got crushed, and they're going to see because they know that his mom is still there. So they go and they find her, and she's crushed under all this stuff. And for like a good 5 minutes, you've seen like rubble flying in, Titans eating people, just mass chaos, bloodshed. Everyone is freaking the frick out. They're like, "This is the end of the world." It's not just like, "Oh no, we're in trouble." It's like, "This is the end of the world.
We're dead." Yeah.
Society as we know it is gone. We're boned. We're screwed. This is done. So you have Mikasa and Eren, who are little kids, and they're running to Eren's mom, and she's under all this rubble, and she's saying like, "My legs are crushed, like you need to get out of here, you're gonna die, like I'm gonna die, like get out of here." And so Eren is like, no, I'm gonna save you, like just hang on, I'm gonna lift this thing. And he's like a kid, he can't do it. And she's like, "Eren, just listen to your mom for one frickin' time." And he's just like, "Oh like I need to," and then Hannes comes and like pulls them away. And she's like, and so and it's just this close up on Eren's mom's face, and she's just like so thankful that Hannes like saves them. And it's in the midst of this, there's the shadow of this Titan that's like coming closer and closer and closer to where she is. And just that whole sequence, even just thinking about it, like when you think of it in this framework, having all the chaos and seeing all the bloodshed and all this stuff, is you have people just clamoring for safety. And so Eren's mom gets them to safety, and she's like, "Oh, okay, like they're safe."
Yeah.
But then at the same time, in that exact moment, she like starts like covering her face because she's like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna die." And then that's when like the Titan's hand reached down, and like the last scene of that whole episode is her getting eaten alive. And it's just like
in front of Eren.
In front of Eren.
And Mikasa too.
And and it's just like, and them watching in horror as they can't do anything.
And just those ending lines of like, that was the day we realized that like humanity was forsaken or something like that.
Yeah, and just like it's just like the power of that whole sequence of
that's
like
the first episode.
and that's the first episode. And it's like the world is just hopeless beyond repair, and it's just like there is absolutely nothing that can save anything. And so for me, that one scene just sets up the entire show to just kind of fill you with just like a burden, like the burden. And all the other characters in the entire show feel that burden too. And I think that's what that would have been the thing that broke Attack on Titan, is if there's like people who are like, "Oh, whatever, it's not that big a deal, ha ha ha, it's like Titans, we kill them."
If no one realized the true,
every single person that entire frickin' show knows the burden and knows the stakes and is fighting against them, and that's what, that to me is what makes it so good. And there's other stuff too.
Well, on top of that, our dad of all that's the no one I
I've
love
literally gotten four or five people to watch that show who all are like obsessed with it now, who are not anime fans whatsoever.
And our dad of all people, so we've tried getting him into anime before. We showed him Cowboy Bebop, and he was like, "Oh, it's pretty good." And we were just like, "Okay, that's another one that didn't work." But like, and he's seen it. He knows that we love anime, but like, he just never got into it or never understood the appeal. But there was one day I was watching season 2, and he like came into the room and sat down, and I was just like, oh, like I gotta change the channel. You know, he wanted to watch sports, and I was like, I can change it if you want. He's like, no, just leave it on. It's okay. I was like, okay. And then like I finished. You know, there was like I won't say what it is.
Major
plot point where even I was like, oh frick. And I was like, you know, freaking out my own geeky way. My dad let me have my moment, but then he was like, so why did they do that? What was the whole thing with that? And I was like, oh, and I, you know, explained the part, and he was like asking more and more questions, and I was like, Dad, do you want to watch Attack on Titan? He was like, yeah, I think I do. And we watched 9 episodes in one sitting.
That's great.
Like, he was hooked.
I feel like that's the only way to watch that show.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you watch it, people are just like, no, let's keep going. Let's keep rolling.
No, it is.
Yeah. And so just to move forward, because so that essentially being Attack on Titan just had, like, I've personally experienced multiple people who are not anime fans and they're like, that's like Pokemon, right? And they watch the show and they're like, good God, this is amazing. And so, so that's one of those things that I would highly recommend. One Punch Man, I think, is great because it kind of pokes fun at the superhero narratives, but it's very funny and tongue-in-cheek, and it's just like a fun watch. It's like very enjoyable to watch. Yeah. It's also fairly short, too. Like, it's not...
There's going to be a second season. Yeah.
Right, but even like season 1 isn't like 30
episodes long. It goes through very fast,
long.
yeah. It's like 15 episodes, I think.
Mushishi, I would actually recommend. Yes. We watched that a couple times in class. That was the one... We watched the episode where... There's like a ghost or something, and that's the one where it's like the dude with the white hair and he has a little grass piece.
Was it like the person in that weird like cabin in the woods sort of thing? And there's like little ghost thingies?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought you were talking about the other one that was like...
No, not the one where it's like all the babies.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that was freaky.
That sounds creepy.
We had to watch that for the class we were talking about earlier. That was jacked up.
I can testify to Mushishi 2. Like, it is probably my 6th favorite anime of all time.
I think that, so the reason I'm mentioning it is it's not one of my favorites. It's not even one that I've seen all of it, but I think there's just a charm to it that it's almost like, I would almost equate it to short films in a world, and you're just kind of seeing different things, and it's like, there's not a lot of like, well, this is why this happens, and this is why this happens, and blah, blah, blah.
It's really open up to interpretation.
Yeah, it just kind of goes, and so I think that's really cool. So just to keep moving. I hesitate to recommend Bleach. As much as I love that show,
I tried watching Bleach.
If you are just looking for, maybe if you're just looking for a show to just
Bleach is okay. This is what I'll say. Watch, I would say the first like 30 episodes before they enter the Soul Society are actually really, really, really good.
Like the Rukia arc.
Not even in the Rukia arc. I would say even earlier. Ooh, like when he first gets his Soul Reaper powers. There's just a few episodes that are actually really awesome character building and are like, there's just like stakes and there's more emotion to it. That are really sweet.
Yeah.
And the Rukia arc is also really cool too. Like, I love just OP people fighting. Like, there's just something dope about that.
Everyone loves the Ichigo and who does he fight?
Kenpachi. Yeah, that's a great fight. But so that's one of those shows where I would equate it to a Dragon Ball Z-ish kind of thing where the narrative isn't very fantastic, but it's just kind of, it's just like I'm gonna watch a bunch of people fight each other with swords and crazy powers.
It's
and
fun.
It's kind of wild. It's like fun. It's like a fun watch. Except for the Bount arc. Skip the frick over that. That sucked. So Bleach, Durarara, I would recommend.
Really?
That one is it's like, it's hard to, and again, I'm saying specifically what about these I recommend. These are majority of which I think most people who engage with anime know of them is also the reason I'm recommending them.
Yeah.
Durarara has a very interesting way of storytelling. It's unconventional and it jumps around. I'm just gonna keep moving forward just because we're almost at 2 hours and I want to like because otherwise we could talk about each show for like an hour a piece.
Definitely.
So Durarara has really cool storytelling. I was on a top 10 anime list and Samurai Jack popped up on there. I know that's probably contentious because people are like, oh, it's from America, so it's not really animation, but Samurai Jack is really dope. Like that.
I need to rewatch that.
If you haven't watched that show, like
kid.
That has probably one of my favorite TV episodes ever in existence, which is he runs into this monster who is a Viking warrior trapped in a body of a stone monster from Aku, and the only way he can break out of his curse, he was like the king of like a Viking village or something, and they got attacked, and Aku killed everyone else except for him, and he locked him in this body of this volcanic monster. He's like, the only way that I can break out is if I die, but I'm
Like
not.
die a
He's
warrior's
like, but I
death.
die a warrior's death, which means I'm not gonna let part of my own honor, but also because of this curse, I'm not gonna let someone just kill me. So you need to fight me and you need to beat me, and if you beat me, then I'm free. And it's just like the whole. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Yeah.
I need to watch that show again.
Yeah,
I
so
love that when I was a
that's
kid.
so it's just a very sweet, like, old school Cartoon Network show.
Mm-hmm.
What else on this list would I recommend? Actually, Digimon's kind of a fun. That's another like Bleach. I would
Hitting
say
on
it's a little more.
nostalgia,
It's like
yeah.
a kid's show, but it's just kind of fun and nostalgia. It's kind of hokey. Psychopath season 1, definitely recommend, especially Zach. For you, not you, but Zach W. Liking Death Note. Psychopath season 1 is very much along those lines. Has very similar tones and different world, different things that are happening. It's kind of cyberpunky, and I'm a huge cyberpunk nut, so I dig that. Cowboy Bebop is awesome.
Very, very good.
Fantastic. Old. It's from the 90s, isn't it?
From the
It's
90s,
like,
yep. People herald it as like one of the best anime of all
ever.
time. Yeah.
So that's like a classic. Like, especially if you're just becoming an anime fan, that's one you should watch. Again, storytelling is a little unconventional. Kind of
It's an
thrusts you
episodic
in to
anime,
watch
yeah.
Spike and Jet, but the characters are super good. The storytelling is really good. Going forward, we have Hunter x Hunter. That's an awesome one. That's another really cool narrative and character driven one.
Non-traditional
One
shonen.
Piece. One Punch Man I already talked about. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, absolutely. That's the reason I like Full Metal is because of. I think the reason I like Attack on Titan is because I watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood first, and I loved Brotherhood, and then I watched Attack on Titan. And I was like, this is like a similar thing but different.
Yeah.
Then it was awesome. Another famous film you should watch is Akira. The anime,
Or read it.
Or
Did
read
we watch
it.
that
I
in
think-
the class?
Yes, that was the one where the It's
Is
like
that what the motorcycle people and
yeah,
stuff?
and like
I thought
the
that was
kid
kind of
with the
weird.
brain.
Maybe I'll have to rewatch it though.
I
I mean,
want.
it's one of those. I suggest that one specifically because it's iconic. And
Oh.
that's
Yeah.
just, and that doesn't mean, God forbid, anyone assume that this is what I'm saying. Just because something is iconic doesn't mean it's good. Citizen Kane is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. People are like, people are like,
But yeah, it's like
"Oh,
one of the
Citizen
most like
Kane, blah, blah,
heralded.
blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
It's like it's all about a sled. It's dumb. But like Akira is one of those movies. I say it's worth watching, but it's like kind of that old school early. It was more a herald of
Yeah.
its time.
Or read for that one.
And you can read the manga.
Yeah, read the manga because I actually heard the professor I mentioned earlier in my manga class actually got to like meet and hang out with Katsuhiro Otomo, the guy who made Akira, and he actually was with him step by step when he was writing the manga. And he said the differences between the anime and the film. He said from the personal side he got to see from Katsuhiro Otomo, he said he personally felt that when he was making the movie, the ending was rushed. So I don't know what that means because I haven't seen the movie. He said that the movie didn't end how I wanted it to be, and there was some stuff he really liked, but some stuff he didn't. Whereas if you read the manga, you get to see the whole complete narrative that he intended it for it to be originally, which is another reason why manga is sometimes better than the anime. So
Yes.
anyway, continue.
And then the last show I will recommend, and I've only seen season 1, and I have season 2 on DVD sitting on my cabinet, so I should watch that soon, is Tokyo Ghoul.
Mhm.
And
Or read it.
yeah,
'Cause
or
I've
you
read
can
it.
read it. I think that's one of those that I've heard there's differences, and it kind of comes down to what your preference is. I really like the anime just because there's certain things. I never read it, but the things that I've watched in the anime, it's kind of similar to Attack on Titan. Is a lot of the fights and some of the motion, and they do some really cool art style stuff, and having certain things highlighted, how they animate it and just illustrate and stuff like that is super cool. Premise for that one is essentially there's these people called ghouls, and they're almost like vampire zombies in a way. They're not mindless like zombies.
They feed off of humans.
Right,
That's
they
their-
feed off of humans, but they like do it in a way where they're not like blood zombies, brains, humans. But
It's
it's
literally
like,
just like that's their.
they have to, like,
have to eat
feed,
it, otherwise.
and stuff happens, and it turns really cool. But like that has one of with Jason, and at the end of season 1 has like one of the most powerful. And I'm not going to go into it because it's just I don't want to ruin it, and it's just like we could talk forever on that scene. But it just has one of the most powerful scenes to me that I think kind of solidifies why that show is so good. And then the result after that, and the decision that the main character makes, to me is again the great storytelling of like not forcing the world, not bending to make a character do a certain thing, and a character actually making volitional decisions. So that's my list.
That was a
Yeah,
good one.
That was a good one. Very long.
you didn't have to pee. Or do you have to pee?
I don't have to pee, but I'm falling asleep.
Are
I'm
you?
so tired.
Did we
yeah.
talk too much?
No, you did. It's not your guys' fault. I'm just tired.
Diabetes.
Diabetes.
Top 2 diabetes.
Yeah, that was good though. A lot of good suggestions. Hopefully, Zach comes away with some good ideas to watch. Another one that just popped into my head is Berserk. I haven't watched it or read it, but it sounds very interesting to me. So
I actually, I can. Well,
we won't
Don't
get into
start
it, but that
anything,
just
but
popped into my
yeah.
head because I remember adding that to the list last minute.
I think
It's also like
there's some
George R. R.
context-
Martin syndrome. Like it's probably never going to be finished, but
Yeah, I've also heard some content things that, you know, like if you're cool with it, and I'm more just saying because I know
That's-
some
yep.
people aren't cool with stuff. Like I personally haven't watched Game of Thrones because there's a lot of sex stuff that I'm just like, I don't want that in my story. Like
if it doesn't
need to-
advance anything, then why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so I think Berserk has some of that stuff, and that's why I've never watched it.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of those other shows I mentioned do have like some content things, but like, it's
Yeah.
like
did you guys discuss that a lot last time? in the
Actually we
podcast?
did. That was
a
like
little
fan
bit, yeah,
service
we kinda,
or something.
Yeah, we kind of addressed.
That's
fan
another
service
reason
and
why I
stuff.
don't watch a lot of shows is because I don't want to really like deal with
Yeah,
that
which is
crap,
funny because
but
I know
yeah.
Chris was much more forgiving of fan service than we
Well,
are.
I think he.
I
Was
can
a-
see. I mean,
he made a good
yeah.
point about it.
Yeah,
though.
I
He
think
made great
Chris
points.
is. I
But
think
we're going
is-
down into another rabbit hole. Here.
Yeah, and just to address it too, like, I know that we all know that fan service is like something commonly attributed to anime, and so I think that's one of the reasons that all the shows we mentioned are like bloody, violent, very dark narrative
or have very minimal.
yeah,
fan
have like
service.
minimal
Yeah.
to nothing. And so I think the thing, and Chris, who's going to be on next week, for our Christmas podcast, is
I hope that's the title. Christmas.
Christmas. Is his opinion is he sees it as a way for it's like a narrative joke, and I think he uses specific examples that it's like for character development. It's not necessarily like literal fan service in the way of like, oh, we're gonna like make this awkward or right this way.
Yeah.
So blah blah blah. That was at the end. Watch all those shows.
Yeah, a lot of
Immediately.
lot of
If you have the
shows.
time,
Watch them
Put
all.
everything else you're doing down.
Just
and
watch
Read
them
all the
every
books and
single
watch
one.
all the shows.
Live. For
I actually
nothing
watched
else.
all of Death Note and Attack on Titan during finals week, so
Yeah, buddy.
it's okay to do.
You gotta take.
I'm not a good
sometime.
influence. But yeah, thanks for your suggestions, Zach. And like Josh said at the beginning, anybody else who wants to suggest any questions or topics that we can discuss, you can email us at therebelethic@gmail.com.
Boom.
And
You got it. All right.
you can check out our podcast at these locations.
Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, and oh crap,
Google
I always
Play?
no. Oh yeah, it is Google Play.
Mm-hmm.
I always forget. I need to remember an order.
I mean, that's
to do
where
it.
I listen to
So
it.
it's
from,
iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio, and they will be on YouTube probably after the new year. I still have to do some things.
Sounds good. And
Yeah.
that's that. Thanks for listening, guys and girls.
and guys,
Fox people and
Fox News. What?
Gundams
And Fox-
and
yeah.
Saiyans
And Fox
and robots.
robots.
And-
Microphone off, Sam.
Signing off.
It was so good.
Voices in my heart tell me to throw it all away, to toss it in the wind and forget yesterday. But the crowd comes singing back with that stone